Story 1. Am I the jerk for not forgiving my fiancé for missing the birth of our daughter? My husband's girl best friend, we'll call her Madison, has never liked me, for reasons I guess I will never know. Anyways, my fiancé, we'll call him Michael, and I were having a hangout with a little bit of the friends that we shared. It was nearing the end of the night, and Madison was the only friend left when Madison came out crying with Michael looking angry. I was around 9 months pregnant at the time. The thing that really caught my attention is when Michael called me a raging B word and a C word. Myself being a hormonal pregnant woman started crying at the name calling. I asked through my tears what was going on, and he then proceeds to tell me about a text message I sent to Madison. In the message I told her to F off, and about how Michael and I would not allow her near our child. I will admit that I did send this, but it was taken completely out of context. I only sent this text after the many racist text messages that she sent me talking about my child and I. I am biracial. Instead of hearing me out, Michael kicked me out of the house that we shared. His name was on the lease. Without arguing, I decided to leave, not wanting to start anything else. As I was walking out the door, I felt a cramp in my lower abdomen. I thought nothing of this, because I was not due for another 3 weeks. When I flinched from the pain, Michael told me to stop faking. On the way to my mom's house, I felt a gush of water and immediately turned the car around so that I would make it to the hospital. While driving, I took out my phone to call Michael, but my call was quickly declined. At this point, I was into much pain to call anyone else and arrived at the hospital. I pushed for 2 hours without an epidural and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Grace Noel. Giving birth without my fiancé by my side was the final straw for me. I decided to do something and post all the hurtful messages Madison sent me on Facebook. Maybe 45 min 1 hour later, Michael calls me asking me if we could talk. I inform him about my whereabouts, and he shows up about 42 minutes later. He has tried to apologize multiple times, but I don't think I can forgive him. I went through the pain of pushing out an 8-pound baby by myself, all because he chose to believe his best friend without listening to his fiancé. Am I the jerk for not wanting to forgive him? Story 2. My unhygienic daughter is accusing me of abuse because I'm trying to get her to shower, so I've nicknamed her Stinky. About a month ago, my daughter decided to stop showering or taking care of her hygiene in any way, shape, or form. When she came to me about this on day 1, explaining that the need to shower is a social construct, she stated that she plans to not brush her teeth or shower to try to prove to everyone around her that you can maintain hygiene without doing these things. At first I thought it was weird or a joke of some sorts. I tried ignoring it, but by the 3rd day, the fact she had not showered after going to the gym or even brushed her teeth, I let her know in the nicest way possible that she should probably shower and brush her teeth. I mean, she had honestly started smelling pretty bad, especially her breath. I had to stand away from her in order to avoid smelling it. When I told her this, she retorted saying that what I'm saying is extremely harmful and triggering to her, and that it's her body, her choice. We had a conversation about it, where I did my best to point out that basic hygiene is important, and I think I messed up when I told her that not showering is complete nonsense and idiocy. She exploded at me, saying that I am being insensitive to her issues. I asked her, what effing issues? The fact you smell bad. She proceeded to storm upstairs and not to shower. Our next argument about it ensued a week later, when she got up in the morning and proceeded to wear the same clothes she had for the last 3 days, once again, having not showered or brushed her teeth. I don't think I can describe how bad the smell was. She is my daughter, and I love her, so I tried again to be as gentle as possible. I told her that she seriously needs to shower, and that what she is doing is seriously not okay. Once again, my body, my choice, was her response. I mean, I guess she's right in a weird sense. She has the right not to shower or brush her teeth as some sort of rebellion, even if it does affect our quality of life. We can't go out because she smells way too bad and would be made fun of in public, and even being around her is quite unbearable as she really does smell awful. So, I figured that if she has the right to do this, I have the right to retort and do something back, regardless of how it impacts her. I figured that I would call her Stinky. That would be my new name for her. I would no longer call her by her name, but rather Stinky, and so I started doing just that. The first time I called her Stinky, she exploded at me, calling me abusive and manipulative, that I'm a terrible father because I'm bullying my daughter, but I never stopped. She still continued to refuse to shower, however, no matter how much I called her, so I took it one step further. I changed her name in my phone to Stinky, urged her to call herself Stinky, and did everything I could to let her know that she needs to shower. She had a breakdown over it a few days ago. It had been almost 3 weeks that I had been strictly calling her Stinky. She came to me and begged me to stop. I first told her she needed to take a step back when talking to me because her breath smelled awful, and she seemed disheartened when I said that. Our conversation can be best described as unproductive, as once again, I got called abusive for trying to make her shower, and I called her Stinky when she stormed up into her room wearing the same set of clothes she has been wearing for the past 4 days. We have not spoken since. We stay clear of each other, and I'm really worried that our relationship will soon be irreparable if she doesn't start showering. Story 3. My 12-year-old daughter tells me that her mental health is deteriorating, but I don't believe her. I am currently with my fiancé fiancé and we live on a farm. My oldest daughter Luna is 12, and she's from a previous relationship. She mostly stays with my ex-girlfriend in the city so she can be with friends and go to school. My youngest daughter is 2 and is from my current relationship. My eldest daughter has struggled with mental health for years, and I partly think it's because of her inability to take criticism. When my daughter was 8, I constantly called her overweight. Because she was, I told her she would be a loser in society if she does not lose it, and so on. My fiancé always tried to intervene, but it ended in a huge fight each time. I separated with my fiancé when Luna was 11, and she started living with her mom. From what Luna has told me, the things I said have impacted her deeply, and she has tried to off herself 3 separate times, but I tell her that my strategies worked as she lost weight, and she blows her mental health problems out of proportion. For the summer, Luna stays with me, and I make her do work, such as planting seeds, building things, pulling grass, etc. My current fiancé and her have been getting along well, that is, until my fiancé got into a verbal fight with my daughter over wasting food she doesn't like. I have a few times caught my eldest daughter crying instead of working, but I don't pay any attention to it and tell her to keep working. Recently, my daughter has come in crying when she was supposed to be working and locked herself in the bathroom. I went to comfort her, and she told me, "My mind is telling me scary things." I told her it would be all right, and she can continue working through the night and have the next day off work. Recently it happened again, but I need her to get her work done, so I told her to push through it and keep working. Luna has been pretty dull and upset lately, and whenever I give her tasks, she seems on the verge of tears. She always seems to be in her own head and wanting to be left alone. I'm sure she's fine, but I can't help but think that it may be my doing. Story 4. My ridiculous wife screamed at my mom, so I told her to calm down. I know telling anyone to calm down does the opposite. It simply came out because she was being ridiculous. My wife isn't a fan of my family. None of them have done anything to her personally, but she states it's because all of them give her backhanded comments or unsolicited advice. I've never noticed it and refuse to take her word for it because my family is super kind. She's told me she's tired of dealing with all the negative comments from my family. That's understandable, but it takes zero effort to be civil for my sake. She says she shouldn't have to be civil to people who don't respect her or take her seriously, and she hates that I never take her side on these things, but I swear they're never happening. I don't want to say she's being crazy, but if the shoe fits, wear it. Anyway, my wife gave birth a month ago to our daughter. On Sunday, I invited my mom and a few other family members down to meet the baby. My wife heavily protested against this because her family hasn't met the baby yet. I told her I didn't see why it mattered which family saw the baby first, as long as they all loved her. She gave in at some point and said, whatever. She clearly wasn't up for it, but it is what it is. I still wanted my mom to meet her granddaughter regardless of what my wife said. Before the occasion, my wife pumped because she knew people would ask to feed the baby. Problem is, my daughter has never used a bottle, as she's strictly breastfed. My wife was pissed from the moment my family walked in through the door. She said her pleasantries, but didn't even talk to them, or was rude in answering any questions they had. What got her in a worse mood was how much the baby was being passed around. She was so red, I just told her to take a shower or something to cool off. She refused because she needed to be there to watch and make sure nothing happened. I hated that she didn't trust my family at all with our daughter, as if they came here with the intent to harm her. They were all just showing love to her and being super kind. But no, my wife was not having it. When the baby started crying and she wasn't passed back to my wife, despite my wife saying she wanted her back, I knew this was it. Luckily, she didn't cause a scene. Well, that was until the baby started getting fed. My mom had the baby and was feeding her the pumped breast milk. That's when the baby started choking on the bottle. My mom is slow, so she recognized the issue, but didn't sit her up as quickly as my wife liked. So, my wife immediately stepped in and took the baby to sit her up right. My mom said, I have kids, you know. I know what I'm doing. I'm not stupid. And my wife snapped and aggressively asked, really? That's why you just kept her on her back while she's choking and puking? She eventually handed the baby back off to my mom, but then the baby choked again, and my wife just lost it. Because again, my mom didn't sit the baby up with urgency like my wife wanted. My mom tried protesting and saying she was being ridiculous, so my wife told her to shut up and get out. I told her she needs to go calm the hell down, and she can't talk to my mom like that, or kick her out of my house. Now I'm getting the silent treatment, because I defended my mother and clearly want the baby to aspirate on her own vomit, as well as calling us all idiots.
Story 5. My awful niece smashed my daughter's face into her cake on her birthday. My daughter's 5th birthday was 2 days ago, and it was the most hectic birthday party ever. My daughter basically planned the entire birthday since she invited her friends and picked out all the decorations. The party was just going to be family and friends in the backyard of our house. Everyone arrived relatively on time, except for my sister. She came hours late with her children. I don't want to sound like a mean aunt, but her children are bad, disrespectful, selfish, and lack any manners. My sister essentially messed around and found out. There was a period of time where she went broke. My parents refused to help her because she had lied to them about going to college college when she actually dropped out and used the money they would send her to buy substances. She never bothered to contact me for help because we were never on the best of terms since she always argued with me whenever she saw me, so she didn't have my number back then. In order to get back on her feet, she hooked up with guys for money. Things went wrong and she got pregnant 2 separate times by 2 guys who didn't want anything to do with her. Because her whole hookup thing was very anonymous, she had no way to find them, so she couldn't even get child support from these guys. She was left alone to raise these kids, but she resents them and it shows, which is why she doesn't care about how they act. She couldn't care less about them being rude to people or not having any proper manners. If anything, they remind her of a period in time where she was at her lowest. She's also grown to hate me even more than she already did because I went to college, have a good job that pays well, and have a happy family. Ever since my daughter was born, my sister would have to hear about her from other family members or see her at family events. I can tell she doesn't like my daughter, and I didn't want to invite her to the party because of it. But my daughter is too young to understand that her aunt doesn't like her and sees the world through rose-tinted glasses where the word hate doesn't even exist. The party was going well and my daughter was having a lot of fun. She especially loved the red carpet surprise we did when she entered the backyard in her dress and heels. I heard my niece ask her mom why she never had that for her birthday, and it actually made me sad. I don't think it's fair how my sister treats her kids, but if I ever tried to lecture her about her kids, she would throw a huge tantrum and call me names. But now that I think about it, I don't think my nieces ever had birthday parties, which would explain why she did what she did. When it was time to cut the cake, my daughter sat in her high princess chair with both of my nieces sitting on chairs on her left and right side. We turned the lights off, lit the candles, and we all started to record as we sang happy birthday. I knew this was a party my daughter would never forget, but not for the right reasons. Just as my daughter was about to blow out her candles, one of my nieces blew it out and the other one smashed my daughter's face into the cake. Not only was that incredibly dangerous, but so humiliating, and it ruined my daughter's birthday. My husband and I rushed to my daughter and I unintentionally pushed the one that smashed her face into the cake onto the floor. She started crying, but I didn't care. The worst part is that some family members were still recording. I yelled at them to stop, but my sister started yelling at me for being immature, pushing her daughter, and said that my daughter was being dramatic. She said her daughters were just joking around, so my daughter was just crying for attention. I told her that her daughters were out of control, and they had no right to do this because it was my daughter's birthday, not theirs. Any pity I had for my nieces quickly left my body as I wiped the cake off of my daughter's face. My husband did damage control by getting people to stop recording and trying to kick my sister and her daughters out without causing a bigger scene. But that didn't work since my sister went as far as calling my daughter the N-word because she's half black from her dad's side. Her daughters started joining her and calling her that, and that's when my husband had enough. He threatened to call the cops if they didn't leave, but I never expected what happened next.
Story 6. What's something you'll never do again in your life? Salvia. It is the most messed up psychoactive substance in the world. My trip location was my girlfriend's place, a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I was having my 15-year-old brother trip sit me to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. This was single-handedly the most frightening experience I have ever had. I am a noob to psychoactive stuff. The only thing I had done before this was mushrooms, and that experience was amazing. Now this was 40 times as strong. My brother and I drove to my girlfriend's place around 10 p.m., and we quickly got everything ready. But before I tripped, I felt like getting cookied on some Mary Jane. After getting baked, I opened the container of purple sticky salvia and grabbed a big chunk between my fingers. I put it in the bowl, hands nervously shaking, all the while spilling the substance all over the countertop. When I finally had a full bowl of the dark, dry, grayish-green leaves, I got ready to take the hit. I had told my brother to keep me on the couch at all times, as I didn't want to cause any damage to the place while in salvia land. That was a bad idea. I sat down on the couch, hands still trembling, and grabbed it. I lit up the salvia, sat back, and held it long as I could. It couldn't have been more than 15 seconds later that I started to feel something. Start of trip. Everything in my peripheral vision started rapidly vibrating, and it eventually covered my entire field of view. I don't even remember exhaling, but managed to yell the words, oh dude, out twice, before completely blacking out for a few seconds. My vision was instantly brought from first person to third person, as if it were scrolling out in a video game. I saw myself on the couch from behind, when all of a sudden my body just completely snapped into this taco-shaped object at the speed of sound, while hearing a violent crack. After I witness this, my vision seems to be scrolling out more. It scrolls out until I can finally see darkness surrounding this square image of what was left of my current reality. I start hearing everything that ever existed all at once, flooding and overloading my brain. I heard every sound frequency imaginable. If I could describe it, it would be like a buzzsaw starting up and reaching its peak, magnified by 1,000,000, multiplied by 1,000,000. The one image of my reality multiplies at indescribable speeds, going and going and going. It finally reached the point where the division of my reality had reached the edge of the universe, and I felt every single thing that ever existed at once. Every time I swallowed, breathed, moved, every other reality did the same, however lagging behind me. It felt as though when I swallowed, every other reality would swallow, and I was feeling that for what felt like literal forever. Imagine a life where all you could do is swallow, non-stop, every day for the rest of your life. That is how it felt to do anything on that couch at that moment. It seemed, however, that the swallowing and whatnot was starting to get to some ending point, and that my realities had stopped multiplying. I felt so relieved for the slightest moment when everything disintegrated from top to bottom. That is when I lost everything I knew. As it reached the bottom, I realized there was a picture behind that disintegration. I caught a slight glimpse of what I was about to be in for. It was me, shaped as some kind of rectangle-like object, laying completely flat, face up, and with my arms at my side. It looked as though my body was stuffed and filled to the brim in a see-through coffin. Not only this, but there were about 20 completely blue men holding this coffin, but holding it without using anything at all. It was just hovering above them. Still, these men had very creepy, stern looks on their faces, as if they were intent on doing their job. In the background of this image was unimaginable, indescribable colors, flowing and melding together, sort of pixelated in the way it was done. I witnessed all of this for about 3 seconds before I was literally pulled into the hardest, most forceful, turning and winding feeling at an amazing speed. It was these blue men, pulling me along with them wherever they went. They followed some kinds of roads that went on for eternities and eternities. It was pure and utter hell. I was witnessing all of this. However, I was being zoomed in and out of third person, all the while being flipped and twisted and turned every which way there ever is and will be. I heard awful sounds and screams. After eternities had passed, it seemed as though I had reached a destination. Everything stopped, and I went to third person. My coffin flipped up, vertically, and slammed extremely forceful and hard into a concrete wall. No, wait, I knew what this was. I could literally feel it. This was not a wall, this was a sidewalk. A sidewalk in front of my old house I used to live in, completely out of state. I had become the sidewalk. I could feel every last particle of my being spread across this sidewalk, and it eventually spread onto my old house. I spent decades living in my old house. Everything that it felt, I felt. During this time, I didn't feel so horrible. It was like I had finally felt a little bit of peace and quiet. But this peace and quiet was ripped away from me when the little blue men came back, somehow grabbed every single particle of me and vacuumed it back into the see-through coffin. I spent more and more time being forcefully dragged and thrown around by these little blue men into various objects. There came a point where these blue men were taking me somewhere, but it was a very familiar place I was headed. I could feel it. They stopped, flipped my coffin up, but wait, what I was being slammed into was not any object at all. It was a very dark, dark shade of green and blue. I was slammed into this color wall and was able to move. I was no longer in the coffin, and it felt as though I was being weighed down by tons and tons of sand. It took every ounce of willpower in me to navigate through this heavy, resistant sand. I started to feel closer to the surface. I wiggled my way up as hard as I could back into the couch and my own body. I was finally back in the real world. Everything looked as if I was seeing every atom and molecule of everything I saw. It was still extremely refreshing to be back. I had never been more happy in my whole existence as a human being, but these feelings were short-lived. As soon as I forced myself to stand up, I was greeted by my brother, who pushed me back onto the couch and exclaimed, "Dude, you gotta stay down." I fell back onto the couch, but shortly after was transported back to right before he said this. "Dude, you gotta stay down," I heard him yell, and then I fell back onto the couch again. This looped for literal forever, and I thought I was stuck in this looped state for the rest of my life. I was entirely convinced at that moment that I had discovered the truth behind life, which was these blue men forcing me to live meaningless, slow, painful lives as various objects, and that my own brother was in on it. He knew that the blue men would do all of this. He knew they would torment me for eternities on end. I was forcefully dragged back into the blue man world again and lived more and more lives as tables, chairs, water, plants, floors, but these lives seemed to be more depressing and meaningless. They seemed so empty, and eventually I felt as though I died. I completely disconnected from anything and everything there was. I just kinda was. But again, salvia did not keep me grounded in one spot for long. I was hurled into another very familiar scene. It was my old house again, but this time I was inside, in the living room. I saw it vividly, every detail of it. I stuck my hand out to signal and say, "What the f?" But I stopped, as I looked at my hand, and noticed it was the hand of my father. My father is still very much alive, but is troubled deeply, and I care for him very much. I started to feel every anxiety he had ever felt. Then next thing I knew, I was in my oldest brother's body. It cycled through endless amounts of people and places, and I felt every single feeling that you could ever experience in your life. It was like getting anxiety times infinity, and it was very unpleasant. While all of this was going on, I was hearing loud, high and low-pitched yells coming from all directions. It scared me, and I felt horrible. I am not sure how I awoke, but I woke up drenched in sweat, face down on my girlfriend's couch, and immediately started saying, "No, never again, I am done, dude, no," to my brother, and then told him I needed water. I stood up and ran over to the sink to drink some water. Everything was still extremely distorted, and I took a huge gulp of water and leaned down into the sink. The next thing I know, I'm being vacuumed into the garbage disposal, and I wake up on the couch with my shirt off, still woozy and uneasy, but feeling better. It takes me about 45 minutes to be able to function normally again. I look at the time, and it is around 11:15. The trip lasted a very long time, longer than I feel it should have. I cleaned my girlfriend's place, drove my brother to his friend's house, and kept thinking about the trip. It's been been about 3 months since the trip. It really scared me at the time, but I feel as though I value my existence on Earth a lot more now. Story 7. My father has found me after disowning me because of my ex's accusation. I'll give a very brief description of why this matters so much to me. My ex-girlfriend cheated on me, and after I found out and confronted her about it, she got scared and told nearly everybody we knew that I had roped her to cover up her cheating. I was placed in custody during the investigation, however released, as there was no evidence. My parents had already disowned me, and most of my friends had distanced themselves from me. I wasn't even proved innocent by a jury, so my parents still believed me to be a rapist who had gotten lucky. My best friend began to help me behind their backs, and I ran away. I had nothing to lose as nobody liked or even approached me, and my college barred me from attending lessons, only emailing me the work and bringing me in for exams. I went as far away from that town as I could and got an apartment after working in some community jobs for some money and managed to sort of stabilize myself. I decided to change my name after a while because I came to hate looking at it for some reason. I still don't know why. This helped me start a new slate, and I made a few new friends when I went into uni. Again, I don't know why I did this. I'm still in truckloads of debt and was incredibly poor looking back. I finished my degree in teaching and moved far away to a country on the opposite side of the globe where I live now. I got a nice apartment and settled down in my new job. I eventually met a girl who turned out to become my now wife. I originally couldn't trust her, and after realizing how much patience she had with me, I would flinch if she tried to touch me or I'd start fidgeting when she'd get close. I fell head over heels for her. She eventually gave birth to my twin daughter and son, who I adore and will defend to the edge of the universe. Her family got used to me very quickly, considering I was a foreigner and not very trusted. They treated me well, and I sort of remembered how a loving family actually is. Now I'm living in a nice house with both of my children and wife, and we're very happy. That is until last night, where I was playing on our PlayStation with my son, while my wife and daughter were in the garden. There's a knock on the door, and lo and behold, my father is there. He smiled weakly and began to speak, but I slammed the door so hard, I scared my son. I took him to his room and called for my wife to take my daughter to her bed. She was freaking out, and so was I. My father kept knocking on the door, and I just broke down in the moment. My wife comforted me, then answered the door for me. She asked who he was, and he said he was my father. I had given my wife a vague background of me, and she had nothing but sorrow for me. She looked pissed, understandably, and began to scream at my father for abandoning me and whatnot. After she calmed down, I told her to let him in, and for her to go to our kids' bedroom and keep them busy while I talked to my dad. He said that he was doing my ex-girlfriend a favor by clearing some stuff on her phone, and while he was clearing out some messages on her phone, he saw a conversation between her and the guy she was cheating on me with, basically expressing the guilt for ruining my life and that she wanted to take it all back. My father didn't confront her as he wasn't ready to bring back a dead situation, but silently began to hunt for me, to tell me that he believed me. I don't even know how he found me, but I don't care because he's here. Now for the part I need help on. I don't know what to do. I've considered my options alone after walking through some random streets, and I've come to some conclusions, but I'm not sure what the best decision is. 1. Turn him away and tell him to go back to our country and leave me alone. 2. Reconcile with him and tell my mother. If there is a better option which you have, then please let me know. I'm stressing out hard here, and am planning to take the day off work tomorrow. My father is in an apartment nearby, so I'll probably go to him with my answer. Thanks in advance.
Story 8. My ex thinks my child is his. I, 31, and my husband Anthony, 32, have been married for about 2 years now. We recently welcomed a baby into our family. I had an ex named James, 35, before I met Anthony. We had a turbulent relationship, with him often coming home drunk and starting fights with me that'll last for hours. He often accused me of cheating when I wasn't, which kept me scrambling for him to trust me. I was stuck in the relationship for 3 years, until I called it quits. During that relationship, we tried for kids. I am ashamed I ever did, but I really wanted to. However, we had a lot of trouble getting pregnant. For years, I thought it was my fault. We even broke up over it, seeming that I could not have children. When I met Anthony, I told him about it all. He was totally okay if I was not able to have biological children, but he still wanted me to get checked up. The doctor said there was nothing wrong with me, so they weren't sure why I couldn't get pregnant. I was so happy from this news. Anthony and I got married, started trying, and I ended up pregnant very early on. At this point, I knew it was James's fault that we couldn't have kids. Early on in my pregnancy, I was shopping and bumped into James. I didn't want to speak to him, but he was being extremely friendly, trying to get back into my life. I was kind to him, but I walked away from him. I kept my pregnancy quiet, only my family knowing about the incoming child. This made it so that I could post about my child on social media, and no one needed to know if something happened. Soon after I posted my baby, James started calling me from Instagram, by phone number, etc. He left me threatening voicemails. He claimed that I needed to give him his baby before he drags me to court. He has begun harassing my family members and even left several comments on the post. Anthony is ready to get a bat and beat him himself. I have no idea how he even thinks he is the father. I haven't touched him in 7 years. years.
Story 9. My sister wrecked my car and is blaming me. I, 19, am the youngest in a family of 5. I have 2 older siblings, one of which is my sister Ariana, 24. She has always been a tad bit irresponsible. She dropped out of college early, to which she blames our parents for, is in huge credit card debt, the whole 10 yards. Due to this, I have tried to be more responsible than her to make sure I don't make her mistakes. I studied hard, got a part-time job, saved as much as I could, etc. I wanted to make a name for myself. We often argue about responsibility, because she thinks that I think that I'm better than her, just for doing better in some things. In some ways, I do think I'm better, but she has great qualities if she just applies herself. However, we have been arguing way more recently due to a recent purchase I made. I bought a car, and not just any car, but one made in 2020. It was pricey, and I saved up a lot for it, so I treat this car like my baby. My sister, however, has a bad reputation with cars. Our parents bought her first car, and she crashed it within the first year. She was fine, but the car sadly was not. Her second met a similar fate. I was avoiding her using my car at all costs. If she needed a ride, I would offer her a ride, as long as she didn't drive. She was very upset about it, constantly telling our parents that I think I'm better than her, and that I'm being disrespectful to her. My parents tended to stay out of it because although they agree with me, they didn't want to hear her arguments. One day, I went to a friend's house down the street and left my car at home. I was gone all day, and I guess my sister took it upon herself to show me a lesson. She took my car and went all around town, testing it out. Want to guess what happened? She rear-ended another car so hard that the entire front of my car fell off. When I got home to find my car in that state, war broke out. I was screaming non-stop, and she began yelling at me back. She told me that if I'd just trusted her with the car, she'd have enough experience with the car that she wouldn't have crashed it, that it was my fault for being so protective. She even said it was not a big deal. I told her if it wasn't such a big deal, why doesn't she pay for it? Want to know what I heard? Absolute crickets. She refused to pay, as it was my fault. I had to leave the house before I actually strangled me. Now my parents are texting me begging me to come home, but I cannot bear to see her idiotic face. Story 10. My mother just confirmed that she intentionally broke up me and my ex. My ex-boyfriend and I were together for just over 3 years. We broke up because our parents, my mother, his father, got engaged. They pulled a lot of crap, but I'm going to try and condense it. They spent months referring to us as siblings and introducing us to people as our children and constantly joking about us as though we were full blood relatives when there's not even a distant relation. When they got engaged, there came even more comments about how we were going to be a regular nuclear family, with a married couple and their children, and Mum telling me I should think of my ex and his sister as my siblings. A bit before the breakup, I had a pregnancy scare. I told my mum, who said it was good I wasn't pregnant because how will you explain to the grandbabies that you have the same parents? They got engaged and had an engagement party where my ex wasn't in attendance, but I was. At the party, my mother gave a speech and said, "Thanks to our children, X and OP, for helping create this wonderful little family unit of ours, aside from your incest." I then had to deal with that for the rest of the party, and X and I wound up breaking up within a week because now our entire extended family and family friends were joking about it. The wedding was on Valentine's Day. We hadn't spoken since the breakup, but X contacted me and asked how I wanted to handle it, and we agreed, either we both go or neither of us go. We both flip-flopped back and forth on if we were going or not, but ultimately agreed to go because it would look worse if we didn't go at all, and we were both asked to be in the wedding party. It went about the same as any other wedding would go, right up until the DJ said that our parents wanted to dedicate a song to their children, and then he played Sweet Home Alabama. Cue laughter. Me and X left after that, but my mum followed. She said it was just a joke. We didn't need to get all huffy about it, and begged us to come back inside. We refused and stood outside while we waited for the next bus. Then we got to talking, and long story short, we agreed to pick up where we left off, as we'd been apart a few months, but all the feelings were still there. We'd not had any other relationships in this time, and he even still had stuff at my place. We agreed that it was stupid of us to let other people dictate our relationship, and also agreed to severely limit contact with our parents this time around. Not full no contact, but very, very low contact. We've also booked some sessions with a couples counselor starting Sunday. Today my mum asked me to meet her for coffee, and I went, thinking that this would be a perfect time to tell her we're back together, talk about boundaries, and initiate the very, very low contact my boyfriend and I had agreed on. However, I ran through the rain to get there, and didn't think to touch up the concealer I'd put on the hickey my boyfriend left on my neck last night. Mum immediately sees it, and asks where it's from. I was about 2 seconds away from George glassing her, but then she says, "It's from your brother, isn't it?" I then snap, "He's not my brother." She now knows everything she needs to know, and basically says that she's been married less than a week, and I'm already trying to ruin it. I got a bit upset, and responded that she essentially ruined my relationship of 3 years in favor of her relationship of less than 18 months, and we've only just started rebuilding what they ruined. She then says, "Clearly, we didn't do a good enough job if you're already mending it." I directly asked if she was trying to break us up. She admitted that she and my new stepdad had entered into their relationship with the sole intention of ending ours, because we said once, in passing, that we had been looking at houses a bit under an hour away so we could have a garden for future kids, and they didn't want to have to drive a 2-hour round trip to see us. When they realized they actually liked each other, wanted to get married, they then became even more committed to ending our relationship because they'd rather we were heartbroken than let their friends and family think that they were odd. So this whole thing started as a way to make sure we didn't move an hour away from them, and now it's them trying to make sure their friends and family don't think they're weird. My mum left an hour ago. My boyfriend is at work right now. Phone off. Totally oblivious. I am still at the coffee place writing this in a state of shock. What do I do with this information? I know I need to tell my boyfriend when he gets off work, but how do we approach either parent going forward or begin to deal with this whole thing? Story 11. My parents want me to take care of my sister's kid. I, 18, and my twin sister, 18, are my parents' only kids. We're their prodigal kids. However, my sister and I chose different paths in life. While she was the outgoing party kid, I was the book-loving nerd. She always had boyfriends. I always chose to hang out with friends and talk about the newest book or show we loved. My parents always loved my sister more because of her ability to charm anyone she talks to. I was always shy and anxious, so I couldn't connect to people well. I don't think my parents ever really understood me. It is our senior year now, and I've already been accepted to some well-known colleges, and with full rides due to a program I am in. My sister was accepted into the state college, which my parents were overjoyed about. One thing is in her way though. She's pregnant, and the father, nowhere to be seen. When she told them, it was the first time I've ever seen them upset with her. That didn't last long though. Throughout this pregnancy, my parents have been making a plan for her to be able to support her child and remain successful, and without discussing it with me, they included me in this plan. One day, they sat me down and told me that I would have to go to the state college with my sister, but only part-time, as they needed my help with the baby. My sister, meanwhile, will be going full-time and watching the baby when she gets home. I stared at them for a minute and told them that I was going to go to the college that I got a full ride to because it was my dream. They then told me that, your dream is over and you need to grow up. You have a mouth to feed now. I was in shock when they told me this. I argued with them for hours. It is my sister's child, not mine. It got to the point where I screamed that they never loved me, and they screamed that, your sister has more potential than you in life. Who cares where you go? She needs to go to college more than you. I don't know what to do. I've been a good kid my whole life. I studied, worked hard, and never got pregnant like she did. I worked hard to go to college, and now they're going to take it away from me. What do I do?
Story 12. I'm afraid that me and my husband may have caused an eating disorder in our daughters. I grew up as a fat kid, but when I got to college, I began taking control of my health and lost 150 pounds. I had a personal trainer, who is now my husband. He was a huge health nut to begin with and really kept me on track and held me accountable. I've been able to keep the weight off for 20 years and are both giant health nuts. We have 3 kids. Our daughters are 14, 12, and 9. We've always been strict about health with them. They each have a workout machine in their room which they have to use for an hour before dinner, and if we walk in and they aren't on their machines, they get phones and toys taken away. My 2 oldest girls have rebelled against this a lot. We've also been really strict with nutrition. We never had anything but fruits, veggies, and lean meats in our home, not even bread. At birthday parties, we took them home as soon as the cake and pizza came out. Never took them trick-or-treating for Halloween, had teachers send them to different rooms when they had class parties with food, told their friends' parents not to feed them junk. I'll admit we definitely sheltered them from junk food in fear they'd grow up unhealthy. People thought we were ridiculous for the way we raised our kids, and we were warned about them having eating disorders, but thought we were doing what was best and everyone was being ridiculous. 3 months ago, we found out that our oldest daughters, who go to the same middle school, were sneaking food at vending machines from school with their allowance cash. Now, my husband found out about this from hearing snacks in their backpacks and had a long talk with them about the dangers of eating those snacks and took the snacks and their money. I heard him talking to them and he was gentle and calm about it, but both girls ended up in tears. Recently, we got a call from our 12-year-old daughter's school counselor. Apparently, she has been chewing up her food and then spitting it out and making herself throw up in the bathroom when she ate lunch. They also talked to my 14-year-old, who said that lately she has been skipping breakfast and lunch a few times a week for the past couple of years because she was scared we would be mad at her when she ate. The counselor was not happy with me and recommended a treatment place for eating disorders. I feel like absolute crap, like we've caused our daughters to have eating disorders and have to look out for signs in our 9-year-old. I called my mom for help. Instead, she berated me and called me a piece of crap mom, which was the last thing I needed to hear. My parents are taking my girls for a couple of days while I get everything together and set things up with the eating disorder treatment place for when they come back. I don't know what to do. I feel proud that I didn't raise kids with a junk food addiction, and I put their health before their tears about not eating pizza, but now it's come at a price. I've been unconsolable, and my husband and I aren't talking right now as we don't know what to do.
Story 13. Entitled Neighbor Wants Copy of Grandma's Will. When my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, she opted for no treatment. She had watched her husband go through chemo, radiation, and surgery, and he was miserable the whole time. She didn't want that for herself. Her family supported her. Over the next year, she gifted items to family and friends, told us to write our names on the things we want, take what we wanted, etc. There were conditions. No, you can't have that. It's a family heirloom meant to go to Aunt and her kids, or to Dad and his kids. We all knew what those items were and who they were going to, so that was easily settled after she died. The house was inherited by my father, who very suddenly and unexpectedly passed away 2 weeks later. later. I inherited the house at that point. The next-door neighbor, we'll call him Todd, came over several times, upset that he and his kids, 21, 19, weren't invited to Grandma's funeral. There wasn't one. We were all too busy reeling from my father's death, weren't presented with a copy of the will. It only included family members, and he knew Grandma loved his kids like her own. She didn't. She complained about them coming over all the time, stealing her water to fill their pool, and she had to tell them to stop calling her Grandma. He wanted to know if I would allow his kids to go through the house to see if there was anything they'd like to take to remember her by. Okay, first, dude, my grandma died 4 weeks ago, and dude, my dad died 2 weeks ago. I thought he was awfully rude, but I offered to let them go through the boxes I had packed that I was planning to donate, and he was offended. I mean mortified. He said his daughter and son had their hearts set on some items that were family heirlooms, and I literally laughed at him. I explained they were family heirlooms, and would be staying with me, and 2 of the items had already gone home with my brother. He said, my kids were her family, and she would have gifted those to them. They should have been included along with everyone else when everything was divided up. Keep in mind that none of us knew this guy or his kids, other than the neighbors next door. They were never at any family gatherings that were held at her house, and the only time I ever heard her talk about them was when she was complaining about them, especially when she caught them using both her hoses to fill up their pool, and then came over complaining because she had put locks on the outdoor faucets. Luckily, Todd's house was in foreclosure, and he moved away about a year later. I have more stories, but those will come later.
Story 14. My boyfriend might be charged for possession of child intimate videos. Me and my boyfriend have been together for nearly 6 years. We share a flat together. We just got engaged this year, and now there's a huge legal situation that might flip my life upside down once again. About a year ago, we had police turn up at our door to talk to my boyfriend. I wasn't home, so everything I know about the situation is hearsay. Apparently, in 2019, my boyfriend's smartphone was caught downloading or accessing child pornography that was under some kind of surveillance. They seized all of his devices and have confirmed their suspicion that his smartphone was the device used. Despite this, they didn't have enough evidence to charge him at the time, and he was let go. He strongly denies the accusations, and it has definitely caused him some serious distress. Since then, things went back to normal, but I was not entirely sure if I trusted his innocence. Perhaps he did it entirely by accident. He is a bit of a dunce sometimes when it comes to technology. I just rationalized it, and with the police seemingly giving up, it quelled any negative thoughts about it. Then, just yesterday, he gets a call from the police. They believe they now have enough evidence to charge him with possession of child intimate videos. He will be receiving a court summons soon in the mail with his court date. He has the option to contest the charge or plead, but he hasn't decided yet. He's never seemed like he's interested in kids. Nothing he's into intimately indicates that. I've never caught him looking at any intimate videos that isn't super vanilla normal stuff. He's certainly not the kind of person who knows how to navigate the dark web. Yet I'm still on the fence on whether I actually believe him, since I know that I'm biased because I love him. He hasn't admitted to anything since he got the call, and he still denies he did anything wrong. If he's charged in court, he'll undoubtedly be put on the Intimate Offenders Registry. He may be imprisoned. It'll probably be in local news. He'll definitely lose his job, because the work he does might now pose a danger to children. If he fights it, there's probably going to be huge legal fees. I just got made redundant a few weeks ago. I'm completely broke. If he's jailed, I can't afford to keep my home by myself, and I will be homeless for the 4th time in my life. I really don't want to be known around my town as that one who got engaged to a child lover. I really don't like the possibility that people will think I knew he was a child lover the whole time. I really don't want it to be true. But even if it isn't, and he still gets charged, it impacts me negatively in a lot of ways. He isn't the only one who's suffering over it. It's very distressing. And obviously, since it's such a sensitive matter, I can't talk to anyone close to me about it without just spreading drama. I can only talk to my boyfriend about it. I have had an extremely difficult life, and I don't know if I have enough soul left to handle this situation alone. I don't know what to do or where to start. I am genuinely lost. If anyone has anything helpful to say, or a similar experience to talk about, that would be very much appreciated. Story 15. My 24-year-old boyfriend still gets breastfed from his mother. I, 26, have been dating my boyfriend, 24, for about a year and a half now. I will try to condense this story as much as possible, but basically since early on in our relationship, I realized he was a huge mama's and grandma's boy. Firstly, I'd like for you to understand our culture. We have a thing called machismo, where the man is treated like the king of the house, and the women attend to their every need. And that's basically what his relationships with both his mom and grandma are like. They prepare his breakfast, lunch, and dinner for him, even if he comes home at 2 a.m. and they are sleeping. They call him at least 15 times a day, do his laundry, clean his house, and basically cater to his every need, which unfortunately is normal in Latin culture. But of course, not everyone thinks this way. The thing is, he's not a very loving person. He just takes and doesn't give very much. He does, however, let himself be swayed by his mother very often. She is a character. We have never gotten along much because I realized her manipulative tactics early on. She is a Cuban woman from the countryside of Cuba and is a very vulgar and open, in a bad way person, with absolutely zero boundaries. She walks around the house without underwear or bras on, allows her sons to pull down her shirt and smack her tits around. If she bends over, we can all see her huge rolls of fat where her butt is supposed to be and just doesn't care. Just to share some examples, me and her have had our fair share of arguments as she began to disrespect my boundaries and didn't understand or like it when I began setting them very strictly. She has talked very openly about her past, intimacy, and things of intimate nature in front of her children and anyone who will listen. She has been abused and roped before and has never been in a great relationship. Her dad was not great to her either, and I believe he was the one who did the intimate abusing. Now to finally get the backstory out the way, I caught my boyfriend sucking on his mom's boobs one day. This family has no boundaries, so they have openly talked about it, and when we got on the subject, I found out he also does it to his grandma. I was flat out disgusted. I will repeat, he is 24. But knowing his past and his mom's, I realized he probably wasn't aware how completely wrong that was, and basically his mom has been verbally and physically intimately abusing him, in a mild nature compared to other forms, all his life. So I tried having a conversation with him about the fact that boobs aren't intimate, but they're there to provide food for our kids, and once our kids no longer need food and they grow up, there are boundaries that need to be respected. He didn't quite understand and just said it was something normal within his family, and I had to explain that just because it's normal doesn't mean it's right. That was 6 months ago, and I thought that had stopped until his little brother told me that he did it again on Sunday. Like I said, they are a very open family, so everyone knows everything. Well now, I am just disgusted. Not only by him, but by his mother and grandmother who have basically led him to believe it is normal. As a woman, I can tell you that there's no way she doesn't feel some type of pleasure from him sucking on her boobs. There's no way. And I'm not really sure what he gets out of it. And that's what disgusts me. I want to help him, but at the same time, I think I should end the relationship before anything else happens. I can't even think about having kids with him because I'm scared for their future. I want to offer therapy for him because I have loved him and want to help, but at the same time, I don't want to make it my problem. What the heck do I do? Story 16. Would I be the jerk for calling off a wedding because my fiancé is extremely frugal? I 31 struggle with my fiancé's 32 frugalness, and not sure if I want to marry him anymore after 3-year relationship. I met my fiancé 3 years ago. He came out of an abusive marriage just 2 years before we met. One of her absolute abuses was financial. She bled him dry, made him buy expensive jewelry only to give it away or break it after an argument. Designer shoes, clothes, big house cars, Caribbean trips. You name it, she made him pay for it. She also took him to the cleaners in the divorce. However, my fiancé is very well off. He makes far over 6 figures, almost 7. On top of that, he inherited a few millions from his grandfather, and his parents gifted him, and his siblings also a few cool millions. So yes, the financial abuse was bad, but he does not suffer financially. He has more money than he will ever need. So last year I moved into his house. I do not pay rent, but I split the bills and buy food. I pay for my own clothes and jewelry. I have a good job and I can take care of myself. However, things have been taking a turn for the worse and I feel miserable. His house was empty when I moved in. He had hand-me-down furniture, maybe 3 forks and 2 knives. He wouldn't put on the heating so the house felt cold and moldy. He has no curtains, no decorations. His ex took everything not bolted down and he was too cheap to replace it. Just imagine $1 million house like that. I am grateful that I can live in his house. It is something I could never afford myself, but I didn't want to live in squalor. So I bought some kitchen supplies, some furniture, but at some point I realized I was dipping in my savings all the time and he did nothing. I looked into curtains, but those things are expensive. His house has so many windows, it is crazy. I didn't want to pay for this anymore. I told him I needed a fund to furnish his house. He blew up at me that I was just with him for his money. I pointed out all the money I spend on his house, the gifts and the trips because he pays for nothing ever, because he wants to be sure I am not here for the money. The fact is, if we break up, I have nothing. The house is not mine. If I spend all my savings on his house, I will be left with absolutely nothing. He wants a prenup and I am fine with that, but I can't help but feel used. Next to that, I am jealous of his ex-wife. I feel like she got treated and I am neglected. He proposed to his ex on a cruise with a $10,000 white gold diamond ring. I got the rhodium-plated Swarovski stuff that might cost like $100. The proposal was at a picnic in the park I organized, paid groceries for, and slaved in the kitchen for. I almost said no out of pure disappointment. However, I am afraid to bring it up and to be called a gold digger. I don't want to be funding a millionaire's lifestyle. He loves everything as long as I pay for it. As soon as he has to pay, it is frivolous, unnecessary. I can live like a poor person by myself. At least the fact there are literal millions lying around doesn't. Hang over me to bum me out and I would just be paying for my own lifestyle. Would I be the jerk for calling off a wedding purely for financial reasons? Because I love this man. But I imagine our cheap wedding in contrast to his ex, her extravaganza. Will our future kids be able to have some luxuries? Or only if I pay for it? What if I ever become a stay-at-home mom? Will I have to beg to put the heating on? I know the abuse is not made up. His family and friends told me separate stories of the abuse they witnessed. Not only did it confirm it, it showed me she was way more terrible than I thought, like stealing heirloom jewelry of his grandma with Alzheimer right after she was widowed, pretending she was gifted these things even though everyone knew grandma hated her guts. I did not realize or see he is doing the same to me as she was to him, and he is, subconsciously, punishing me for what was done to him. I am not trying to force a lifestyle in him where he was previously happy in. He told me prior to moving in that he left his house like this because he was depressed after his wife took everything, even the curtains, that it makes him sad, and he wants a cozy home. He just didn't know where to start. His house is paid off thanks to granddad. He isn't actually spending much on utilities either. House is very well isolated and has solar panels. It is weird to see how cheap being rich really is. I am not asking for designer furniture. IKEA all the way, and I have refurbished secondhand furniture myself. I am actually pretty thrifty. I see where my jealousy over the ex, her lifestyle might have triggered some people. Let me explain. A $10,000 ring is insane and stupid to me. I do not want that because I would fear for losing it every day. I don't need an over-the-top wedding. However, it almost feels like for her he did effort. Wanted to give her what made her happy. Put effort and thought in it. With me, it almost feels like he wants to prove how little he can give me. He talked about how he would see the wedding and it is cheaper than my actually financially struggling cousin her wedding. I can't help but feel he wants to demonstrate how cheap he can treat me. And I already feel embarrassed about the family that would have been to both, and I will feel like the discount wife. I don't like to say it, but it feels like he gets a on it to some extent. We are almost talking washing paper plates at this moment. Yes, I did discuss selling the mansion I really don't need and move to a more modest house, especially knowing this is the house his ex picked. He doesn't want to do that. He loves this house. But I feel really intimidated living in a house I could never afford anyway. And so many large windows. Sheesh, I haven't talked to him yet, but pause on the marriage and counseling is a must. I already am looking for IC because I realized I might indeed be too much of a people pleaser, allowing him to control me with the ghost of his ex. I also am going to separate for a while. I am looking to rent something for a few months so I can get some space. Story 17. I can't deal with my crazy Christian husband anymore. I have been married to my husband Peter for 17 years. We have 2 kids, Joan and Eric. Peter and I have been best friends for the majority of our time together, but things changed. About a year ago, Peter got into a car accident. He got hit by a drunk driver and was in a coma for a month. It was a really rough time for the family, and the kids and I were pretty much constantly by his side when we weren't at work or school. Thankfully, he pulled through, and he was able to get back to his life after months of recovery and intense physical therapy. Things started to feel like they were going back to normal, until he became super religious a few weeks ago. He started to believe that God had saved him, and that he needed to use the second chance he was given to spread the gospel. I'm all for people expressing their religion, but he has latched onto a very conservative type of Christianity, and it is causing a lot of friction between us. Eric is currently in his senior year of high school, and is working on the college application process now. Joan has been watching this and is very interested. The other day, she came to me crying, saying she'd asked her dad what colleges were good for computer science, since she's been very interested in coding for a while now, and her dad said she wouldn't be going to college since her future job was to be a wife and mother, and college would be wasted on her. To say I was furious would be an understatement. I went to him and asked him why he said that. He replied that he was spreading the good word, and he wanted to make sure we didn't lead our children into a sinful alternative lifestyle. I asked him if he expected me to quit my job. I work from home as an accountant, and focus on being a wife and mother too, and he said that he'd wanted to talk to me about this for a while. He said that he wanted me to quit my job, since it is not suitable for a woman. This absolutely blindsided me, since he'd never expressed anything like this before. I told him that I would not be quitting my job, and our daughter would go to college, whether he approved or not. He rolled his eyes and said I'd come around. It escalated last night. Joan was going to go to the movies with a couple friends, and she came down wearing a pair of jeans and a crop top. Typical teenager stuff. Nothing she hadn't worn before. Peter stopped her and told her she had to change. She asked why, and he said he wasn't going to let her leave the house looking like a skank. I was shocked. He'd never used language like that before. I told her to leave just as she was, and she left. Peter asked if I even cared about our daughter's soul, and I told him it's her body. She could dress herself how she wanted. He said her body is the property of God, not her, and that I needed to respect his religion. I told him I'd never respect a religion that treats women like second-class citizens, and he left the house in a huff. He hasn't come back yet. Ida, I think he has something deeply wrong with his little delusional head. First things first, I'm safe, and I'm out of the house with my kids. We are safe and with my dad, and my finances were already largely separate. We have a joint account, but that's a small, fun money account for movie tickets, dinners out, and stuff like that. I have my own savings that he cannot access. My mom had a gambling addiction when I was a kid that nearly ruined our finances, so my dad made me promise I'd have my own savings. Turns out he was really smart to say that. A lot of you said Peter needed to see a doctor because this could be a symptom of a traumatic brain injury, which I agree with. The problem is, since he was discharged months ago and the more worrying symptoms happened recently, I can't force him to get treatment, especially since nothing he said would be considered threatening. I had a call with him yesterday. He asked where I was, and I refused to tell him. He didn't get upset, thankfully. He asked why I took the kids and left, and I told him he wasn't the man I married anymore. I told him that things seemed to be getting worse, and that I needed him to see a doctor because this wasn't normal. He dismissed all of my concern, saying that he was finally being the sort of man he was supposed to be, and that the medical mafia is trying to make the godly parts of him disappear. I again told him that he wouldn't be seeing the kids or me until he saw a doctor. As soon as I said that, he hung up. I already blocked him on social media, but my brother sent me a screenshot soon after of a Facebook post he made. It was an unfocused rant that went on for several paragraphs about how doctors and Satan had gotten to me, and that I was hurting our daughter by letting her wear sinful clothing, and that I was setting her up to be harmed by vicious men in the workplace. All the comments were his friends telling him he was scaring them. Nobody was on his side. He said they had to cast Satan out of their hearts. When I saw this, I couldn't stop crying. I knew it was over then. There's no way I could make him better if he doesn't want to get better. I sat the kids down and told them I was going to start the process of getting a divorce. They took it really well, and Joan just kept saying thank you. I asked her if anything had happened other than words from him that I didn't know about, and thankfully she said no, and Eric said the same. We're safe, and he can't get access to my finances. I'm looking for a place of our own since the house is in his name, and I'm going to send my brother and his husband to get our stuff while he's at work tomorrow. I'm looking into lawyers now. Story 18. My coward ex is trying to get me back. After he let his mother torture me for years. My ex and I were married for well over 5 years and together for 10. His mother was a nightmare. She would spend her time belittling me and tried humiliating me. I could take it as I loved my husband and didn't want to make him choose between her or me. Of course, I would always tell him what she would be doing, and he would always brush it off as her being a loving and overprotecting mom. When she would say something racist, I am Hispanic and they are white, he would laugh it off. When she would make a comment of me being a gold digger, even though I earned more than my ex, he would just say, "Oh, mom." He would also get mad at me if I ever stood up for myself. But the straw that broke the camel's back is when we had our daughter. My mother-in-law would always try to parent her and say that I would do something wrong. My daughter has an irritable colon and she cannot ingest any kind of oils or artificial things. And guess what that loony of a woman did? She fed my 3-year-old daughter essential oils, she is not anti-vax, just very stupid, to make her go to sleep. She was in the ICU. I had it, and I confronted my husband, who said she only did what she thought was best. I lost it. I went to my parents and drafted a divorce agreement. That's the best course of action. I saw a post earlier describing a situation that is much more dangerous than mine involving allergens and an EpiPen. His face was like that Pikachu meme when I served him. He didn't know why I was doing that because we were happy. So now a year has passed and my life was hell. My monster-in-law tried every dirty trick in the book to take my daughter. To name a few, she accused my brother of inappropriately touching her. She accused me of neglect. She accused me of taking substances and leaving them in reach of a toddler. I take thyroxine, for heaven's sake. She accused me of endangering my daughter by leaving a random man in my house, and the list goes on. During this time, the excuse of my ex was that I broke his heart and I had to understand his mother. She only wants what's best for him. Luckily, I got good representation and even got my daughter full-time minus some weekends or visitation. I could prove that my daughter was endangered by his mother. I knew that my ex needed to be permanently in my life because of my daughter, and I was learning to live with that. He was very cold with me because, again, I broke his heart. Now 2 things have come together. My ex-brother-in-law got married to an African-American woman, so of course my ex-mother-in-law flipped. I started dating again. My ex-brother-in-law is a great guy, and he actually stood up for his wife. Go figure, it is possible. I stay in contact with him because we are friends, and he was a mediator and fought with his brother quite often. So my brother-in-law actually stood up for his wife, and my ex-husband got his panties in a twist. My brother-in-law basically opened his eyes to how crappy he was being, and that their mom treated me the same way she treated his wife. And finally, my dense ex started understanding. The guy I am seeing is great. I have even met his parents, and his mother is normal. She treats me like a human being and has invited me already to many family functions and tries to make me and my daughter feel welcomed. My ex got wind from the situation through a mutual friend, and guess who is now flipping his crap? He started bringing flowers and chocolate, I don't even like chocolate, to pick up our daughter. He sends me cards and texts with hearts and who knows what. Yesterday was the best thing. My daughter was at my mother's place and I was at home with my boyfriend. He appears in front of my door crying and clutching my engagement ring, begging me to come back. I said no and that he should go away. He wouldn't, and started demanding that I come out to talk to him. My boyfriend told him that he would call the police, and in his pathetic fashion, he threatened to beat my boyfriend up. I closed the door and let him pound sand. Today, he picked up my daughter for a day trip, and when they came back, my daughter was asking if I loved my boyfriend more than her. Now, I am at a loss to what to do. I already told my daughter that it was impossible because my love for her is infinite, and there is nothing bigger than infinite. But now I know that my ex is trying to make my daughter hate me. I am at a loss because I won't use my daughter as ammunition. But also, what the hell am I supposed to do? I will never return to that man, but I can't take away the father of my daughter. Do you guys have any advice? I don't care if he wants me back. I don't love him anymore and will never get back together with him. Staying for the sake of our daughter would not make sense, as it has been proven that kids grow up happier in divorced homes than unhappy homes. I tried talking to my husband when we were still married and he would always brush it off. He would brush off everything his mother did. I complained to him and told him we needed to go to therapy, which he declined. He has his daughter on the weekends. The court gave me majority custody because of his mother. I followed some advice you guys gave me and we sat down with my daughter to chit-chat. We knew we couldn't prompt any kind of responses by asking overly specific questions as per her therapist. So my mother asks my daughter, let's call her Kat, "Kat, what do you and daddy talk about?" And Kat just listed many toddler things, like she talks about kindergarten, games, etc. When I was kind of relieved that that comment my ex made yesterday may just be a one-off, came the big bomb. He also shows me pictures of houses and tells me I can have now 2 rooms with loads of stuff. I ask if her dad is buying a new house. Nope. Turns out that nut wants to take my daughter out of the country. He shows her pictures of beach houses and even bought her a bag so she can put her stuff inside it, which explains why so many of her clothes have gone missing. At first I thought that maybe my ex hadn't told me yet because it hadn't come through. But no, he told my daughter to keep this as a secret because mommy would get sad if she knew that daddy was going away. I didn't have enough evidence to request an ex parte, aka emergency child custody. So my lawyer and I had to work on steps to prevent child abduction. We got a custody decree that included provisions including passports, travel restrictions, etc. We also had to be very wary of the signs. He in fact quit his job, and on a realtor's page, I saw that he was putting his mother's house on sale. That and my daughter's words was all we needed to notify law enforcement for them to keep an eye out. I couldn't prevent my daughter from seeing her father. We tried to continue business as usual without my daughter feeling something was up. I got a call from the police department regarding the passport situation. My daughter's passport had expired very recently, 5 years validity. My ex-husband had tried to request a passport for my daughter without my knowledge, which was stupid because even without the decree, I had to be present or submit a notarized document of me stating that he could request the passport. After that, things actually went very fast. He was investigated because he violated the decree, and it was found out that mother-in-law had bought 3 tickets with no return date to Mexico. I could request an ex parte. After a crap ton of documents, I submitted it. In most cases, the judge will evaluate behind closed doors. We had the hearing yesterday. It takes usually 10 to 20 days, which was very good for me. At the moment, I have sole custody for my daughter. This is all temporary. My ex has visitation rights if I was present, but he can't take her anywhere. This is once the investigation of him is closed. I was cursed out by my ex and ex-mother-in-law, and they said they will try to contest this, but they have no leg to stand on. My daughter will continue in therapy, especially after this. I will not prohibit him from seeing her, but he needs help. Story 19. 19. My pervy family helped hide my fiance's affair with my best friend. I found out a week ago that basically my entire family has been helping my fiance Alex, M23, hide his affair with my best friend Peach, 23. So a week ago, Alex was taking a shower and had left his phone on our bed. Me and my fiance have an open phone policy, seeing as we both struggled with getting cheated on in past relationships. Go figure, seeing my situation. I was packing my suitcase for a family trip that is happening after my rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I heard his phone keep going off. He yelled from our shower if I could mute his phone. I went to get his phone and saw that it was Peach calling him. I was curious at first, but seeing as she's part of my bridal party, I didn't find it too suspicious. I muted the phone and soon messaged Peach from my own phone. Here is the paraphrase of our conversation. Me: hey Peach, my fiance is in the shower right now. What did you need? Peach: oh, nothing. LOL. Just wanted to confirm with him the flowers for your bouquet and aisle. Me: that's weird. I didn't change my mind on any flowers or anything. The florist was contacted last month and everything was paid for already by Tony. Tony is my mom's husband. Peach: are you sure? I remember him telling me you changed your mind. After that, it was the usual wedding talk after that point. In hindsight, I should have found it very weird that she would call him about 6 times to confirm a flower choice, when she simply could have either texted me or Alex. When Alex got out the shower, I told him Peach tried calling him about my flower choices. I asked him what made him think I changed my mind on the flowers for the wedding. He paused for a bit. I now know he was basically stalling and doing the "oh, I'm thinking" face when I had asked. He then said that he thought I had mentioned it in passing during a dinner. I told him that I didn't recall that. He then just shrugged and grabbed his phone and went back in the bathroom. I hate to be one of those people, but for once my gut actually sunk. I got this really paranoid feeling and I couldn't shake it. I tried to convince myself that it was just my old cheating trauma trying to creep back. Yet, I just couldn't let this go. Me and Alex had dinner and I pushed through all the way until it was time to go to bed. I pretended to fall asleep first. Me and Alex usually cuddle to fall asleep. When I knew he was in a deep enough sleep, I went to check his phone again. I checked his Instagram, Snapchat, and messages, and I couldn't find anything. I then went to his Facebook Messenger. He has Messenger to communicate with his family overseas. I only saw his main family, and most of the messages were about getting plane tickets to come to the wedding. We were supposed to get married in December with a Winter Wonderland-themed wedding. However, with my previous relationships, I checked his archives on Messenger. That's when the truth came to light. There was a group chat with Peach, Alex, Richard, my brother, Angie, my mom, and Maria, my sister. The group chat was established a year ago where basically Alex and Peach confessed to having an affair to my family. My mom did shame them at first, yet she later asked Alex did he truly loved Peach. Because you can't. Help who you love. Yeah, really great, Mom. That was super helpful. He said he was absolutely sure and that he also loved me too. Then Maria and Richard offered that Alex bring up to me an open relationship. They both are in open relationships and married, and apparently it's working for them in whatever la la land they live in. At this point, me and him were already engaged. Alex mentioned to them that it seemed too far deep to try to bring it up. Angie, my mom, even though at this point I hate to even call her that, said that they would cover for Alex and Peach until he felt strong enough to bring up an open relationship to me. As I was reading, all I could think was how in the actual hell could my family betray me like that? How could Peach betray me like that? We've been friends since kindergarten. We even grew up with Alex. How could she process in her mind to F my fiance and say that she loves him too? All of this in this disgusting group chat? For Alex to have the nerve to say he loves me as well? For him to know firsthand what it's like to be betrayed like this? I honestly wanted to vomit. However, I was just taking screenshot after screenshot. The more I read down, I found out that Peach took my spot on our previous family trip. I got a really bad stomach bug a while ago that caused me not to go. I can't even begin to imagine what they did on the trip. And the fact my mother was okay with all of this, I think is what hurts the most. The fact she's known for a whole year that my fiance was cheating on me. That's taking the longest to sit in, I feel. There is more in the group chat, but these were the major points. I've known for a whole week. It's been eating at me inside and I want to explode and cuss them all out. I want to ruin their lives the way they ruined me. It all hurts so much and I just really want advice on how to confront them. I'm planning on confronting them tomorrow at our rehearsal dinner. It's been about 3 hours since the rehearsal dinner. Everything is crap right now, but I'm happy the hard part is over. I sent the screenshots to Alex's parents and explained the whole deal to them. I was honestly expecting them to ignore it or not believe me. However, they called rather quickly. They asked me if Elle had any hard proof of them cheating besides their confession. I confided in them that I didn't. They asked for more screenshots, and I just basically sent them a good chunk of the screenshots. His mother made me feel so awful for sending them. She was sobbing and apologizing for her son. She soon became inconsolable. His father took the phone and asked was it anything his son could do to make it up to me. This early morning I was offended he asked that. Yet, I saw it from his perspective later. I asked him if I could be frank, and he agreed, told him that unless his son could shrivel up and disappear, then there wasn't anything really he could say. His father said that he understood. I asked him if they could keep this to themselves until I brought it up to Alex. They said they could, and we ended the call. For a while, I thought vomiting from stress was a rare, but it finally happened. Alex heard me, I guess. Me vomiting, not the phone call. I stepped outside to have it, because he woke up and tried to rub my back. I held my hand up and cleaned myself up. This is around 7 a.m. in the morning. Alex had concern in his voice and was asking if I was okay. For once, I actually saw nothing but red. Yet, I kept the composure. I have no idea why, but I guess that will be my superpower lol hold on to. I ignored him and just went back to sleep. I woke back up at 8 a.m. to start getting ready for the rehearsal dinner. Alex told me he had to get some things done before heading to the restaurant. I told him that was fine and that I'd see him later. Before he left, he said he loved me and this was one of the days he was excited for. I said me too, trying not to have much rage behind it. Once he left, I gathered all the screenshots. For some people that don't know, you can schedule text messages to be sent out at a certain time. I decided to do this to send it to everyone. Peach's family, our friend groups, his family as well as mine. I sent it to go out at 1:25 p.m. This would be the halfway point of the dinner, and people would be dropping off gifts early for us and etc. I gathered the black hole of stress forming in me and headed to the restaurant when it was time. My mother and her husband were already there. My mother hugged me and all I could do was stand there. To feel her hands on me almost felt like she was personally violating my spirit. I did a quick tap hug so she wouldn't get suspicious and we headed inside. Guests started flowing in and everyone was surprisingly on time, besides my grandparents, but they moved slow so I didn't blame them. Once everyone was gathered, Alex went on this whole spiel of how he was happy everyone could come and that he was excited for his family for the next dinner. He mentioned how I was the love of his life and how he was so happy our families would mingle and we could be one. I wanted to ask him how dare he say that, but nothing but fake smiles and nods from me. Peach was basically looking like a clueless dog and smiling right along and clapping for us. To see this happen in real life is truly mind-boggling. The lengths people will go to have their cake and eat it too. I could barely eat as the stress was getting to me so badly. At the time, I set for the messages. People's phones started buzzing and Alex's and Peach's phone were blowing up. I would like to admit that for once, a genuine smile crept on my face. It was like watching an entire kingdom crumble and fall. The horrified faces of Peach and Alex when they looked at me was golden. It's the one highlight I will hold on to from this emotional day. My aunt went ballistic. She started calling my mom a cruel, heartless B-word over and over. My mother hurriedly checked her phone and saw I sent her the screenshots. She started screaming and becoming irate, saying I was really trying to ruin her life again. I was an affair baby. My grandparents' reaction hurt the most because they started screaming at my mother. My grandmother was trying, with a few of our other guests, to hold my aunt back as she started screaming every explicative she could. My grandfather was screaming at my mother that he didn't raise a man-pleaser. At this point, everyone is in screaming and crying hysterics. My other bridesmaids were cussing Peach out and calling her a man-lover. I hate to admit again, ill took joy in that. My grandfather went on to screaming at Alex with some things I can't say here because he was very explicit. I just started laughing and sobbing. I had so much emotions that I genuinely think my body didn't know what to do, so it did everything. The tears just kept coming. My cousin escorted me outside as fast as she could with Alex chasing us down. He kept screaming my name and begging to talk. I ignored him and my cousin was pushing him away from her car so she could get in and drive off. She took me to my aunt's house and told me to stay there and not answer the door for anyone. My aunt and cousin came back home. They hugged me for like a good 5 minutes. When we finally broke off, I noticed my aunt had a few scratches on her. I'm assuming they couldn't hold my aunt back from my mom for much longer. My aunt caught me up on everything. Apparently after my cousin drove off with me, Alex came back in and started screaming at Peach for ruining everything. They got into a screaming match and some of our friends were trying to split them apart. My grandparents, aunt, and Tony, my mom's husband, were drilling into my mother for answers. Tony was the most livid. Apparently during the family trip I couldn't go to, my mom told Tony that I had offered my ticket to Peach so she could enjoy a nice break for herself. Tony at this point is screaming and reading some of her messages out loud. She was begging him to stop and that she could explain. My aunt started adding on that she better start explaining because all she sees is a worthless mother and vile person. Apparently this set my mother off and she started screaming about how she hated me, about how I ruined her life and made it difficult, how she felt like she could never be happy because I was always a constant reminder of her biggest mistake ever and she regretted not baby garbaging me when she had the chance. That set my aunt off and she basically pounced on her. For context, my aunt is infertile. In her words, I was the daughter she never got to have. So in her mind, she went full mama bear mode on my birth giver. Tony is divorcing my mom. He's had suspicions for a few months she's cheating again. Peach exposed Alex's text to her that he was sleeping with her because he felt I was growing distant a while back. Elle was putting in overtime at work to save up for his birthday, and that he was lonely and didn't know how to bring it up to me. Peach's father spammed her with calls and will be cuting her off finically. Apparently this is my fault and I'm an evil witch for ruining her according to her texts. My mother has been on a tirade with our family exclaiming, I'm an evil person for destroying her world again. Half-sibs felt it wasn't their place to say anything to me and that I should have expected Alex to look elsewhere because humans aren't monogamous and people love who they love. Same old, same old. My aunt has been helping me with all this. All I can say is that they're down and I'm up. They tried to unalive themselves. Things have escalated heavily. Once I woke up and took a long hot shower, I turned my phone back on. I couldn't even unlock it or clear notification before I got a call from one of my bridesmaids. I answered and she immediately started screaming at me about how could I ignore Peach and Alex in their time of need.
Story 20. I think my children are effing. I hope their little baby together doesn't turn out with 6 fingers. I have a bit of a blended family. I married my beautiful wife, Portia, about 14 years ago after my late wife passed away, leaving me with 3 kids alone. She came with 2 of her own in tow. They were all very young, the youngest 2 being around 2 years old. I thought we found a perfect family for our kids after they lost someone very important to them. As our youngest 2 children were too young to remember, I always raised them with the assumption that they were biological siblings. They didn't need to know the horrible truth that both of their parents had passed away. I should have also told them how disgusting it is to touch your literal sister. They were always extremely close, treating each other like fraternal twins. They acted like they could hear each other's thoughts. They would speak to each other with some weird hidden language. To be honest, they freaked the hell hell out of me. Every day I would wake up thinking they would start doing backbends and chasing after me and my wife with weapons. As they got older, their attachment to each other got worse and worse. My wife and I tried to put them through therapy, but they would just fight us off and sit quietly the whole session. Then, one day, it just stopped. They didn't talk all the time. They made friends outside of each other, and they acted like normal kids. I thought my life was finally simple. That was when I started hearing little squeaking at night. I ignored it every time, hoping it was my kid just jumping around in their bed. But when I tell you it was loud, the whole house could hear it. One night, I had enough and went to tell whoever it was to quiet it down. What I saw scarred me for life. When I opened my son's door, I saw 2 filled latexes on the floor and a third being used as my youngest son plowed into my daughter. I screamed at them instantly, and they told me to get out because he had to finish. What do you mean finish? I separated them instantly and nearly threw them to the floor. I made them put on some clothes because I didn't want to see their miniature as hell private parts anymore, and told them to meet me in the living room right away. I made them sit down and explain why the hell they were doing this. They told me that they were meant to be together, that only they could understand each other in the world because they shared the womb. I don't know how to tell them that they aren't even related. They proudly told me that my daughter is now pregnant, and they were hoping to make a whole family together. I nearly smacked them across the room. My wife and I sent my son to his grandmother's house while we try to get my daughter a baby garbage because I refused to have her walk around with her soul brother's baby. Story 21. My wife gave birth to a black baby. We're both white, and our baby looks just like her best friend. My wife, 30, and I, 31, have been in a happy marriage for 6 years. The reason why I put happy in quotes is because it was all a lie. We have been trying for a child for 3 years now. We'd tried everything, calendars of her ovulation, different positions, fertility treatments, etc. When I went to the doctor, they said my sperm count was low, but it was still possible for me to have kids. It felt like we were never going to have a child of our own. I was about to give up and look into the idea of adoption when my wife surprised me. She blindfolded me and brought me to a room full of clothes. She made me pick up each piece of clothing and guess who it was for. They were all small, and I was confused as hell. That's when she told me she was pregnant. I was thrilled. I bought everything we needed for the baby. I took care of her every need. All I cared about was that she was my wife, and we were finally getting a product of our love. When she gave birth, I was the one holding her hand while she screamed and pushed. I was the picture-perfect husband. When our baby boy was born, we were ecstatic. But there was something that immediately caught our attention. He had dark skin, like really dark skin. It's impossible for him to be ours biologically given our backgrounds. We're both European white. Our skin is so pasty that a bruise would stick out like a sore thumb. I thought we were happy, that we finally got our dream of having a baby, but there's no way this baby is mine. It's all starting to make sense. Her best friend is a black man. I mean, if I look at the baby closely, I could see his nose. I confronted her, and she begged me to believe me. She said there had to have been some sort of mix-up. I told her that her and her BBC can have their happy little family now. She was sobbing when I left, but I refused to look at her at all. Her and her family have been blowing my phone up, begging me to give her a chance to explain. I love her, but I can't have some black dude ruin my life forever. Turns out I'm just a jerk. After weeks of ignoring her and telling all of our friends that she was for the streets, she forced me to listen to her. We had Life 360 with each other, and I absolutely forget I had the app. She tracked me down to a nearby McDonald's and nearly dragged me away by my ear. I don't hit women, so I just let her. She brought me to her car, and I literally thought she was about to unalive me or make me watch her and her little BBC action. She pulled out some paperwork and shoved it in my face. It was a paternity test. Turns out she grabbed my toothbrush and hairs and compared it to the little black baby's DNA. It was a match. I could hear Maury screaming, "You are the father," in my ears. I was so embarrassed. I started to try to apologize to her, but she just slapped me, then hugged me. It was the worst whiplash I've had in my life. She dragged me off to our house and my mom was there. It was like some sort of intervention. Turns out, I'm not completely pasty white. My mother admitted to cheating on my father years ago with some BBC dude. Turns out I'm an affair baby. My father had some suspicions for years, but when I was born, he finally stopped bugging her about it. Why? She couldn't have cheated because I was white, just like him. I think I'm sort of medical mystery. The black gene skipped a generation. I turned out white and she got away with it. When she saw that I left because of my black baby, she contacted my wife and explained. My wife is just an innocent victim to all this. Now that I think of it, me and her black best friend do have a similar nose. Maybe his father is my father? I apologized to my wife and begged on my knees for her to forgive me. She said that as long as I use my new BBC status on her, she'll take me back. Maybe we'll have more little mixed babies. I have a lot of making up to do. I missed the first month of my son's life.
Story 22. My parents want my wedding to be a party for my golden child sister. I'm planning to elope because my parents are trying to make me agree to letting my sister's boyfriend propose to my sister at my wedding. My baby sister is the golden child. Or maybe that's unfair to say. She survived cancer when she was a child. It was the darkest period of my parents' life. I don't don't remember much of it because my parents shielded me from the horrific truth. I knew she was sick, and I remember all my childhood spent in hospitals, but never did I know that my sister almost died until many, many years later. I was 12 and she was 10. After she beat her sickness, she became the obvious favorite in the house. She got everything she wanted, and sometimes it was at my expense. I resented that, but I always heard that I was a naughty girl for being jealous of my hero sister. My sister grew up to be a brat. Now 20 years later, she's still bratty, although we get along a lot better than when we were teenagers, young adults. My wedding is in July. Neither my fiancé nor I have the money for a big wedding. We settled for small wedding, 30 people, at my fiancé's grandparents who have a beautiful house with lake view. My parents, when they heard this, said no way and offered to pay for a bigger wedding and better venue. We didn't agree at first, but later we did not want to disappoint them. It seemed like it was important to them. Last week, my mom invited me over. My dad, mom, and my sister's boyfriend asked me what I would think if my sister's boyfriend proposed to my sisters during the wedding, so it becomes an engagement party as well as a wedding. Mom has seen reels on Instagram about people proposing to maid of honors, our bridesmaids, and thought it cute. My sister is my maid of honor. I said no, that's ridiculous, and laughed. My mom was livid. She told me I was selfish and ungrateful, and I accused her of favoritism. I told her I always thought it was odd that you'd pay for my wedding, but now I know the reason why. She started crying and kicked me out of the house. Later, both she and my future brother-in-law sent me texts warning me from exposing their plan to my sister. My fiancé was disappointed but not sure what we could do. My parents have spent almost $30,000 and it's too late to cancel. My mother called me today to plan the proposal and I begged her not to ruin my day. She told me since she was paying she can make requests and that I should let go of my jealousy and resentment towards my sister because she's innocent in all of this. But the thing is, this day will be about my sister. I told my fiancé to ask his grandparents if they're still willing to host my wedding. If they're, I'll revert to our original plan. If not, I will just elope. Not sure yet if I'm going to tell my family and cancel the wedding or just let them have their grand proposal party. None of my family is invited to my wedding, including my sister. I refused to let them win and had my wedding without them. I had a back and forth texting with my future brother-in-law, where he called me jealous and bitter. I have now blocked him. He texted my fiancé apologizing, but we didn't answer. I must start with saying that I really tried my best to negotiate and compromise with my family and truly explain that this was hurting me. I have nothing against my sister, and to be honest, nothing against her getting engaged on my wedding, but the principle that it was made very clear to me that I had absolutely no opinion or say in what was going to happen on what's supposed to be my special day was where I drew the line. It wasn't a wish or a request. It was a matter of fact, and it was decided. So I told my mom that I'm not going to attend the party she's paid for. Maybe they should just make it an engagement party instead. She got very upset and told me that the engagement was supposed to be a surprise. I told her that I was just giving her the heads up since she's about to lose an insane amount of money. She didn't take me seriously, like I wasn't going to cancel my wedding because of a trivial thing. What she didn't know is that I've already made plans to get married a week earlier at my grandparents-in-law. We invited our closest friends, and some even had to book earlier flights and take more vacation days. For these people, I was extra grateful. What was left was my sister. I'd been back and forth arguing and negotiating with my parents and future brother-in-law. I decided that even if this would ruin her surprise, I had to tell her, so I did. She wasn't really happy with my mom, but she was more upset that I ruined her surprise, and she, as I expected, thought I could have just sucked it up and gone with the flow. I didn't tell her about my new wedding date. The wedding was dreamlike. In the back of my head, I was hurt. The people who loved me the most weren't there, but I pushed that thought away and refused to let it ruin our day. My husband was amazing. He promised to make me happy for the rest of my life and to make up for every heartbreak I've experienced in my past. My in-laws surprised us with upgrading our honeymoon to a 5-star hotel. I had my friends and some cousins and my favorite aunt attending. We asked them not to live stream or upload any pictures to SM until we're already on our honeymoon. We also asked them not to engage in any altercations online with my family. Today, my mom made long Facebook, Twitter, Instagram posts bashing me and my husband, calling me ungrateful and disrespectful with pictures of my wedding, telling people I've cost her a big chunk of her savings and she's now demanding compensation. Her Facebook post was shared about 200 times, and the majority of my extended family is angry with me. She never once tried to contact me. I really thought she would bombard my phone. Instead, both her and my dad announced that they're cutting me off and are expecting compensation. FBIL commented that I ruined his surprise, and my sister made a post about being tired of jealous bees and haters. None of the people we invited has commented, even though some of them were directly attacked, so they respected our wishes. Story 23. My husband is obsessed with my boss, and it's all my fault. I started this job about 1.5 years ago. I can't say what it is because I want us to stay anonymous, and our country is very small, so my boss would probably be recognized. The moment I started, I felt like I was in the right place. My boss, the owner of the company, is very cool and kind. She's self-made and she loves her job. She does a lot of the dirty work herself that bosses who has 30-35 employees wouldn't have to do, but she just loves it. On top of that, we have a 6-hour workday, our salaries are 20% higher than the market, and we have 7 paid vacation weeks a year. Her reasons? She appreciates us and she's getting richer anyway. I was so proud of working with a woman like her, so I wouldn't shut up talking about her to my husband, especially in the beginning. My husband was as fascinated by her as I am until he met her in a company party last Christmas. She must have been beautiful when she was young. She could have been a model. I think his fascination became a crush or an obsession, or maybe worse, love. Now he follows her on social media. Her accounts are private, but he stalks her with my account. He also follows the company IG and likes every picture she's in. He asks about her all the time. She's a very private person, but when her divorce from her ex-husband was finalized in the beginning of this year, we all found out because he started showing up to work. He owned 1 to her company now, and he started to try to make changes in our work hours and salaries. We found out that her husband had cheated on her with a younger girl, who he also tried to employ in our company. She still works with us. She, probably lawyers involved, eventually convinced her husband to sell her back his share. We're still in this process now. My husband has followed all this, and he was so sad for her, and so angry. How could anyone do this when they had a woman like her? If it was him, he would cherish her, love her, blah blah blah. Who leaves a woman for a girl? I got very angry and told him that all men prefer younger women if they could choose. He laughed at me and told me only losers do that. The last drop was last Friday. We were out for a movie night and we saw my boss with a young man. He looked in his mid-20s. My husband lost it. He didn't know that she dated younger men. He wanted us to go say hello, but I refused and yelled at him to control himself because he looked pathetic. When we got home, he was frenetically going through her social media until he found the guy, and he sighed in relief. The guy was her nephew, and we didn't see the whole company, but they were out with other family members. My husband was so happy, like a weight lifted off his chest. I lost it on him. I started crying and yelling and told him he was in love with her, and he was shocked when I pushed and kicked him out of our bedroom. I locked the door. He stood outside trying to calm me down, telling me he loved me and I'm his girl and always will be. Then he said something that ruined me even further. It's not like someone like her would look my way. I haven't slept since then. Why is he feeling like this? Is it love? Infatuation? She's too old for my husband, so what is it? And why would he think he couldn't have her? He's very handsome and still young. She should feel lucky a young handsome man likes her. And does he mean I'm less than her to accept him? Or is it purely her money and status? He refuses to admit anything. And what can I do now? I love this job. I love the benefits. Thanks to this job, our life has improved and we can afford more than just the necessities. I'm starting to hate my boss though, and I hate myself for idolizing her in front of my husband. Hi, I'm in so much pain and I don't know what to do. I don't want to do something stupid while hurting. I got a lot of good advice last time I was here, so I don't know. Maybe you can help me this time too? My old post is linked in my bio. I hope you read it before this one because I don't want to tell the whole story again. I went against my family and friends and asked my husband for separation. I felt like my heart couldn't take it anymore. My intuition told me that my husband wasn't all mine. This was shortly after the event at the movies. My husband was in total confusion. He said that I was making a mistake, making a mountain out of a molehill, but he moved in with his brother, however. We decided to start couples counseling too. It went well the first 3 weeks or so, but my husband became more and more reluctant to participate, and sometimes he just canceled on me last second. He stopped showing up this month, and he also stopped calling and texting me. I was even more heartbroken, but it just solidified that my intuition was right, and that I was doing the right thing, seeing that he is not interested in working on us anymore. I chose not to quit my job. I still loved it with all the heartbreak, and I really needed the benefits. Like, I'm the only one I know who is having a 3 weeks paid vacation around Christmas and New Year. I never see my boss anyway, and she doesn't even know of my existence. My husband eventually stopped being active on Instagram, and I thought it was normal because we were going through adversities uni yesterday. When his brother shared my husband's stories of the night, my husband was in a restaurant holding a woman's hand. I could only see her hand. So my husband has just blocked me and my family and friends from seeing his updates. I commented, "What?" And this morning my husband called me for the first time in months, totally scared, and started begging, "Please don't ruin this for me. Please don't ruin this for me." I told him, "What do you mean?" He said, "Don't tell her about us." I never made the connection at first. It never ever crossed my mind, even. That woman in the picture was my boss. I started crying and screaming at him. "How could you do this to me? How could you tell me that it was all in my head when it's obviously all over your Instagram?" He said it just happened. I dumped him and he was single and just happened to find her on Bumble. He begged me not to ruin this for him. She knows he's in the process of divorce, but she doesn't know that he already knew who she was, or that she was the boss of his STBX. They have been seeing each other for 6 weeks, about 2 weeks after I asked him to move, and it is getting serious. He begged for a good 5 minutes, telling me how he hasn't been this happy in all his life, and that I shouldn't ruin his happiness since, again, I was the one who ended our marriage. I have been crying since this morning. I don't know what to do. I want to ruin him and his happiness, but I don't know if I have any right to do that, and I'm so worried about losing my job. Please help. New information. Okay, my husband has been calling me nonstop, and I have now answered him. He is panicking about me telling her everything, so he begged me to give him the chance to tell her himself. His words were, "I never stalked her or creeped on her. I just fell for her and was scared that she would think I was creepy since you thought the same. Give me a chance to tell her the truth in my own pace, so at least she doesn't think I'm a liar or a freak like you seem to think." He still swears they matched on Bumble. I didn't know what that is until now, but it is like Tinder. I'm just devastated right now. He has no regards for me and my feelings. Everything he is thinking of is not to scare her away. When I told him this, he said that I was the one who left him. People fall out of love, and that okay, and no one's fault, and that I was in the right for ending the relationship, but I was the one who ended it all the same. Don't hurt us, and I promise to give you everything you want. She is happy with me, so don't hurt us. Update. I talked to my boss yesterday, Monday, after lunch. I told her everything. Basically how I was so happy I found this job, how I looked up to her and was proud to be working for someone like her, and that this rubbed off on my husband, who grew more obsessed with her each day. I apologized for using obsessed because I didn't know how things were between them, but that it was how I perceived his feelings. I told her about the day at the movie and how it basically made me realize that our issues were greater than I thought. I told her that I know and accept that my marriage is over and that my husband didn't love me anymore, and that the reason I'm telling her now isn't to judge or blame her, but to let her know the whole story because it's just fair that she knows that he has been following her life for over a year now. Because from what I understood from my husband, you are under the impression that you just matched with him on a dating app, I said. She was silent the whole time I was talking, just listening listening to me until I mentioned the dating app, and that's when she interrupted me. That's not how we met. He has been a patron at my gym for the past 6 months, maybe year, she said. I know her gym. It's the one across our workplace. She works out there every morning before coming work. I didn't know he had joined it because I knew him to be a member at the gym near our home. He has been, without telling me, working out just across the street from me every morning without telling me. She looked like how I felt, shocked. I apologized and told her that he has kept dating her a secret from me, and that he begged me not to talk to her, telling me that he hasn't been this happy and so on. She didn't say much, just thanked me for telling her. Today she asked if she could talk to me. She apologized for everything that happened to me, and asked if I needed any help. I said no. She thanked me again. When I got home, my husband was there. He had called me at least 50 times, but my phone was on silent. He was crying, calling me bitter and vindictive and pathetic. He said I ruined his relationship and future. She is scared of him now, and it is all my fault. He wants me to tell her that he is not dangerous, nor is he a pervert. He wants me to tell her that I was the one who wanted a divorce, and that people fall out and in love, and it is nobody's fault, and neither is it creepy. He hasn't done anything wrong. He stayed faithful to me, and would have stayed that way if I didn't kick him out. He asked me if I ever felt unsafe with him to make rumors about him being a stalker and a creep. I should tell the truth. I asked him to leave and that I'm starting the divorce, and from now on he could only contact me once I got a lawyer through them. I have been crying since he left. We haven't seen each other for weeks, and he had no feelings whatsoever for me. He looked demented and full of sorrow like a broken little boy. How could he change this fast? Story 24. My boyfriend said I'm too fat to put liquid kids in. My boyfriend said he doesn't want to have intimacy with me anymore. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 years. We met because I am friends with her sister, and we became close over time since we worked together. Then she introduced me to her brother, and I asked him out. I thought he was fine. Until a week ago, he told me that he no longer wanted to have intimacy with me. He said he loves me, but he doesn't want intimacy anymore. I asked him the reason, and he mentioned that he is not attracted to me intimately or physically, just emotionally and lovingly. I asked him what about my appearance does he not like? No. He said he didn't like how big my rolls were getting, and he hated having to push back stomach to go inside of me. I must say that my appearance really is not the best. I am fat, around 165 pounds, and I am 5'4". I have polycystic ovary syndrome and insulin resistance, so it is really difficult for me to lose weight. I also have a lot of hair on my leg area and facial area on my chin. I always try to shave, and I really diet and exercise, but I can't lose weight. He, on the other hand, likes to take care of his body, goes to the gym, and also eats healthy. What he said really hurts me. He doesn't find me attractive, and it makes me doubt too much, in the first place, because I don't understand why he agreed to go out with me. Did he do it out of pity? Why doesn't he break up with me? Why did he wait 3 years to tell me he doesn't like me like that? Besides, does he want to sleep with other girls? He has a pretty high libido, and when we had intimacy, he really enjoyed it or something? Or did he just have intimacy with me out of obligation until he couldn't stand it anymore? He also makes me ashamed of myself. I can't tell anyone. I really feel that is embarrassing. I want to clarify a few points. Intimacy really isn't that important to me. I think what hurt me was the fact that I thought I wasn't attractive to my boyfriend. If my boyfriend, now ex, was asexual, I would have gladly supported him. As I said, intimacy is indifferent to me. In fact, almost every time we had intimacy, my ex-boyfriend was the one who initiated it. In the morning, I asked my boyfriend if we could talk. He agreed. I asked him what he meant about him not wanting to have intimacy, whether he was just with me or in general. At first, he was very hesitant to answer, but he ended up saying that he doesn't want to have intimacy with me. I asked a lot of questions, like, if you don't want to have intimacy with me, how are you going to satisfy yourself? He told me that he was hoping to open the relationship or something, that telling me that he didn't find me attractive was a roundabout way to tell me to open our relationship, according to a friend of his. I'm not interested in that kind of thing. I really always thought that to have an open relationship, it's better to be single. So I simply told him that I was sorry, but that unfortunately I don't share the same ideals as him, and that it was better to break up. We don't live together, but I spent most nights at his house. After talking, I simply went to work. He has been sending me messages that he wants to talk, that I have to think carefully because I am throwing 3 years away, that my good friendship with his sister is going to go down the drain if we break up. When I didn't answer him, he started insulting me, saying things like, I don't think you'll find someone like me with your weight. I only went out with you out of pity and because my sister asked me to. Oh, he also called me a fat B-word. I really believed I was the problem. I blocked him recently. I've been crying because despite everything he says hurts. Besides, I have many things in his house that I want to recover.
Story 25. My son told me I was a terrible dad for divorcing up ex-wife, so now I am telling him I want no contact. Me and my ex-wife got together in our teenage years, got married at 21 and had our son at 22. After our son was born, we slowly started to drift away. When our son was about 11 or 12, I decided to pull the plug on my marriage. I don't know why, but my wife was very shocked. By that time, we had already had a dead bedroom for about 4 years and hadn't had any deep discussion for about the same time. I was just done. I took about a week for me to move out, and all this time my ex cried all the time, begging me to stay, but I stood my ground. My son was very angry at me and wouldn't talk to me at all. I understood why. In his eyes, I was hurting his mother. When I finally moved out, he didn't want to see me at all. I tried really hard, came regularly to see him, but he always told me he hates me and ran to his room. I was devastated. The divorce was finalized in about a year. Custody was in place for 50-50. We got my son in therapy, but it just didn't help. He hated my guts to the core. I never wanted to force him to go to my place. I could, but didn't want him to resent me even more. I still wanted to be there for him. Went to his games, sent him birthday and Christmas gifts, but he shut me out completely. Last thing he told me is that he doesn't want me at his events anymore. I went to my ex house a couple of times, but she always told me that he doesn't want to see me and that she wouldn't make him. At this point, I was cut off completely. I found myself in a long, dark road of depression and pain. It was like my son died, the lowest point of my life. But one day I woke up and was just done. I rebounded and have since moved on. I met my wife, and we have 2 beautiful kids. Life was great again, until about a year ago, when I got email from my son. He apologized for everything, that he recently got a child, and started reflecting and realized how horrible he was to me. He wanted to reconnect and be in my life again. There was much more in email, but I don't want to share for privacy reasons. I didn't feel anything when I read this mail. I didn't respond. Since then, he sent about 15 emails detailing what is happening in his life and his kid. I never responded, but I figured I at least owe him some kind of closure. I didn't send it yet. It goes, "Dear son, I would appreciate it if you stop sending me emails. I went through hell and back to be at this point in my life. I have a family again, and I'm very happy right now. I understand you have regrets and some guilt about the past, but I hold no resentment towards you, and I forgive you. Bringing you back into my life would introduce complications I am not willing to face for my own good and that of my family. I simply cannot give you what you seek. I want no further contact. I hope you understand and wish you all the best in your life. Goodbye, OP." I didn't send it yet, and finally told my wife what is happening. She read all the emails and my draft and was horrified. She begged me to not send it and open my heart for him. We argued and a demand for therapist came up. She even told my parents, and my mom went nuclear. She started berating me like I was a little kid again. I don't know why she doesn't understand. She was with me all this time and saw what I went through. In the end, she told me if I did this to him, she will do the same to me. I was speechless. I don't even know what I seek here. I went through similar stories here, and a lot of the comments were not nice to people in my position. I don't know. Maybe I am a prick and need to hear it.
Story 26. I dropped my friends for spilling my husband's biggest secret. I told him this on the 4th of July. After the fireworks mostly ended and we were heading back, I asked him in the car, wouldn't it have been weird if we met each other before the first time we actually met, but we just didn't think of each other as significant at the time? He smiled and turned to me saying, "Pfft, that's impossible. There's no universe where we would have met, and I would not think of you as significant." That statement struck me in the heart, because I knew I would soon prove that sentence very wrong, but I continued on with my anyway. What if I told you we have met each other before? Before that time I was introduced as E's little brother's friend? He looked at me like I was crazy, so that's when I pulled over on the side of the road and pulled out my phone to show him the post I put up here before. That explained everything. He took about 8 minutes to read the whole thing, and when he finished he put the phone down and stared straight ahead, almost like he was dumbfounded, scared, and confused all at the same time. I started throwing out every excuse and apology I could muster at the moment for about 15 minutes straight when he decided to tell me to stop, and I did. Then he just sat there and sobbed uncontrollably for about 10 minutes before he finally asked me how much of our relationship and how much of my identity was fabricated according to his liking. I told him the honest truth. None of my personality or identity was fabricated for him, except for the fact of how we met. The only thing I ever changed about myself to make him like me more was lying about liking Chinese food. I hate Chinese food. But other than that, everything else was real. Although my friendship with his younger brother was built upon ill intentions, my friendship between his brother and I are now one of the most genuine friendships I have now. He just cried and told me that he does not want to divorce at all, but he does want us to have some time apart so that he could absorb the truth that I gave him. He also said that he expects me to tell his brother and mom this Friday because they deserve to know the truth just as much as he did. I told him okay, and we drove the rest of the ride home in silence. When we got home, he hugged me and cried for about 5 minutes before he got out the car, packed his stuff, and said that he will be staying at a nearby hotel for now. He said that he knows that he still loves me, but does not yet know how to react to the fact that the beginning of our relationship was very, very orchestrated. To sum it all up, I guess telling him was a success? I honestly don't know. He sent me a good night, and I love you text last night while he was at the hotel, so I guess he's as much mad as he may be betrayed. Update. Woke up this morning to find out that hubby not only lied about going to a hotel to stay at, but also lied about not wanting a divorce through a text message. He went to his family's home, not a fucking hotel. Told them the entire story himself. Probably exaggerated it too to make me seem crazy. His whole family wants nothing to do with me too. Claims I'm psycho. He said that he lied about going to a hotel because he knew if he told the truth I would try to stop him. Honestly, I feel so betrayed. I tried to be a good wife by showing him the true me, and this is what he does? I did all this work just for it to end up like this? Honestly, I kind of deserve it. I didn't even tell him in the first place because I felt bad. I told him because I had a suspicion that he was catching on to the fact that I knew him for 2.5 years before he knew me, largely because I found out he was keeping my old phone in his work desk. My old phone that has screenshots of a lot of his old Instagram posts, plans in my notes app about him, etc. So I guess he never truly loved me if he can't even get past an honest confession like this one. I might update this in a few years when I find a new husband. Story 27. People who have been kidnapped. What was it like? I was around 18 years old, we'd been dating for about 8 months, and I broke up with him because my parents were treating me differently, and I didn't like it. It put too much strain on both my boyfriend and I, and my parents and I's relationship, and I couldn't take it. Broke up with him one night, and about a week later he showed up at my parents' house wanting to talk to me. My mom answered the door. I didn't want any part of it, so she told him to go away. He got belligerent and eventually left. so she called the police. He was pulled over and given a warning, then they let him be. Dad was at work, Mom took sister somewhere, and I was playing Mario Party 8 on my Wii at home. There was a knock at the back door and I looked through the glass from the couch and he was there looking in trying to talk to me. Again, I didn't want any part of it, so I ignored him. He got mad and shouldered the door. The frame cracked. He did it again and the door burst open. I said, "What the F are you doing?" And he grabbed me and put me over his shoulder and carried me outside. I figured he was just going to put me in the front seat and leave with me, but then he popped the trunk of his car with the remote, and I realized what was going to happen. I twisted a little, which surprised him, and he dropped me, but then he put me in a headlock where I couldn't breathe and I stopped struggling. He tossed me in the trunk and shut it and drove off. At this point, I was doing everything I could to get out of the trunk, so I started kicking the back of the seats to get out. I eventually got one open enough to stick my head through to get some air. It was in August, and the temperatures outside were riding 95 degrees, so inside the trunk was about 110. I got my head out and could finally breathe. He had calmed down a bit, and I knew he just wanted to talk to me, so he didn't really freak when I was able to climb into the back seat. When he was putting me in the trunk, the neighbor kids were outside, and they saw what was happening and ran inside to tell their parents. Parents called the police called my mom, and my mom was doing 95 down the highway to get home. Ex-boyfriend drove me an hour and a half away to an old camp he used to go to, and we talked for a while. He then took me to Pizza Hut because I said I was hungry. I remember wondering why no one was concerned that I was waiting for a pizza without shoes or socks on, because no one said anything. I figured my parents hadn't realized what had happened yet. Little did I know, an Amber Alert had already been issued. Anyways, he decided he didn't want to go to jail, so he was going back to his house to get his shotgun. When he got there, the cops were waiting for him and tried to taser him. They missed, and he jumped back in his car and did a backwards U-turn. He started driving through the city at speeds of 60 to 85 miles per hour. If you've never been in a high-speed police pursuit, let me tell you, it's a rush. So much adrenaline. Anyways, he was going to get on the highway, but the police had it blocked off with spike strips, so he turned onto a back road that dead-ended. He ended up crashing into a tree. I was in the front seat by this time. The cops swarmed the car, pulled us both out, and since they didn't realize who we were, cuffed us both and put us in separate cop cars. Once everything was situated, they uncuffed me and put me in a police SUV and transported me back to the police station in my city. Parents and sister were there, freaked out, found out I was okay. The whole ordeal lasted around 10 hours. Ex got 4 years and is now out of jail in a halfway house. Story 28. Found out my husband has another family, so I abandoned him in a foreign country without his passport. It doesn't matter how long you have been with someone, you can never know the entire truth about someone or what they're truly hiding. I thought my husband was the absolute perfect partner, and the 6 years that we had been together felt like pure bliss. We met at a work event since we have jobs in the same industry, we both travel a lot for our careers, and we both loved traveling as a hobby as well. In the first couple of years of our relationship, we traveled together to multiple countries on our shared bucket list, and each trip felt like another chapter in the never-ending romance novel that was our lives. He made me feel cherished and free. We explored the world together, and I never thought anything or anyone could come between us. But like I said, you never know what's going on in someone else's head, no matter how well you think you know them. It was an average morning the day I found out about his ugly secret. We woke up together at our shared apartment, and he scrolled through his emails while I drank coffee. At one point, he got up to use the bathroom, and I remembered something I needed to look up. I didn't use his laptop often, but I just needed to look up one quick thing, and I figured it would be okay. That's when one email in particular caught my eye. It looked like some sort of document sent by a contact with a woman's name. Something told me to just click on it. The document was some sort of children's elementary school form that my husband needed to e-sign. I was confused. Whose child was this? Why did my husband need to sign paperwork for some random kid? It just gave me a weird feeling, and I decided to open his laptop back up after he left to get us breakfast that morning. I kept snooping. In the next half hour, I uncovered his entire second secret life that he had been hiding for about 4 years. It turns out that 2 years into us dating, he had cheated on me and gotten the other woman pregnant. She gave birth, and since then, he had been visiting them regularly and telling me he was on a work trip every time he was flying out to see them. I felt like I was watching some sort of horror movie when I eventually found his baby mother's Facebook and found years of family photos of them all together, smiling. I looked at his smirk in the photos, and it felt like he was laughing at me. I couldn't believe he had planned out this entire fake double life of his and managed to lead me on successfully for years. I wanted to strangle him the moment he walked back in the door, but a bigger part of me wanted to show him that I could plan too. I could lie too. So even though it hurt me, I acted like everything was fine that morning. I even suggested we start planning our next trip. He was more than glad to. And by the end of the day, I had booked our tickets to a week's stay in Morocco, a place I had been, but he hadn't. It was so hard for me to smile in my cheating husband's face. He was nothing but a worm and a liar to me, but I needed to make sure my plan went smoothly, so I kept playing the happy wife. The very first night in Morocco, I got him super drunk and he passed out pretty early. That's when I packed up every single thing in our hotel room, including his passport, and I left him there alone while I took a taxi to the airport. I left him there without his wallet, passport, or phone. It's been about 2 weeks now and I haven't heard from him. I wonder if his baby mama is concerned about him. Too bad. I hope he's stuck there, feeling afraid, alone, and abandoned, just like me. Story 29. I stopped supporting my trans son. Now I feel terrible. I have decided to stop supporting my son, and I feel awful for it. Part of me wants to say this all started when he was little, but the main issues came about when he turned 18. I was far from a perfect mother. I got pregnant at 16 and had him at 17. I was lucky that I finished high school early. Shortly after I had my son, his father and I got married. Then soon after, my now ex-husband vanished, clearing out our bank accounts and making them negative. I spent the next 6 months sleeping in my car and getting back on my feet. I wasn't always as present as I wanted to be. I often needed him to be in daycare so I could work and get by, and he was always a handful. Every school year, it was the same thing. He was smart, and a kind kid, but would always refuse to do the schoolwork. Every year, 2 to 4 calls from the teachers wanting to figure out what was going on. As I started doing better financially, I would get him tutoring and therapy. We were constantly doing this dance of him doing better at school and emotionally, and then taking 5 steps back and throwing tantrums because he had accountability in keeping up with the grades he could obviously maintain. When he turned 18, we came up with an agreement. I would happily continue paying for his trans care. My son transitioned when he was 16, out of pocket. I'm self-employed. I pay for everything medical related out of pocket, depending on the co-pays that month, anywhere between $400 to over $1,000 or more, so long as he would keep going to therapy, go to therapy with me, and went to school at least part-time, 2 classes a semester at the JR college. He agreed it was reasonable, but almost in the same way he always had. He tried really hard to wiggle out of all the above. The situation devolved from me needing to ask him to move out, to him moving in with his BF of 2 months, to then 6 months after that moving out of his BF's parents' place to a friend's house. All the way we bickering about him going to school and therapy and me nagging him about when we will have sessions together. Fast forward and he blocked me on everything on social media, claiming I was controlling him and manipulative. One of his main points was a phone conversation we were having where I was mentioning that I was starting the process of moving out of the country and wanted to know if he wanted to come, and then followed it up with giving him options to look at other countries. I genuinely feel and believe that America is going to become increasingly unsafe for trans people, and I just wanted him to be safe and consider his options. After therapy and reflection, it almost feels like this was just him pushing more, because he was asked to be responsible for himself and had to do the work and didn't want to. Fast forward even more, and now he's in contact with his biological father, the man who abandoned us, and says they are his family now. I'm not even angry. I'm sad and broken.
Story 30. What is the most terrifying thing you've experienced? I have a big family. One day we were all hanging out in the family farm and decided to spend the night. We just had girls in one room and boys in another, and everything was going fine. It was around 4 in the morning when I woke up to one of my cousins standing by the door. The hallway light was on and shining on my face, so I could only see his outline, but I knew it was Josh. I asked him what he was doing and if he needed something, but he didn't move, and my eyes were starting to adjust. I could see more details, but I couldn't see his face. I was really sleepy and confused. When the hallway lit up, Josh's shape, everything disappeared. It was just darkness and an open door. I knew I was awake because I was sitting down. I decided to get one of my roommate's cousins up and go check on the boys. Josh had an allergy to something. He didn't want to bother anyone, so he took a Benadryl and went to bed. When I checked on him, he wasn't breathing. We got my uncle up. He gave Josh some heavy-duty medication, and we took him to a hospital. Everyone was fine. Josh told me he knew I was insomniac, and while he was suffocating, unable to make a noise, he kept praying I couldn't sleep and decided to check on him. Story 31. My girlfriend is begging me to give up my Ivy League scholarship so we can continue dating. I am being faced with an amazing opportunity, but I don't know whether to choose between my academic career or the love of my life. I would do anything for my girlfriend, but I am feeling extremely nervous to simply give up the future that I've been working for since I was 13. My girlfriend and I have been dating since we were 15. We're both 18 now, and in the middle of applying to colleges. Ever since I was 13, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, since it was my favorite subject. Ever since then, I've worked tirelessly in all my science classes and done any type of scientific extracurricular that public school had to offer. My girlfriend and I met in our high school science club. I was the president, and she had just moved to the area and was trying to join clubs to make new friends. We fell in love in only a couple of months, and we've been together since then. I truly believe she is my soulmate, and it's only making this decision harder. My girlfriend doesn't really understand my passion for science, since academics have never really been her thing. Don't get me wrong, she is a smart girl, but I have been applying to Ivy League colleges, and she has said that she's fine just going to community college after we graduate. She pretended to be supportive of me, but now I see that she never really wanted me to get accepted into the colleges that I wanted, since they're all far away. Either way, last week I received my acceptance letter in the mail from my top college, Princeton. My hands were shaking as I read the letter, and I saw my dad cry for the very first time when I told him the news. It felt like a dream come true, until I told my girlfriend about the letter. I remember being so excited on the phone telling her about how they were offering me a full scholarship, but all she said was, "Yeah, that's great," and ended the call pretty fast. The next time we saw each other in person, my girlfriend broke down crying and said that she couldn't deal with the fact that I would be so far. She said she felt bad about asking, but then she looked at me and asked me to turn down my scholarship and go to school in the state so that I could remain close to her. I don't even know how to describe what I felt when she was saying all this. Up until that day, I saw her as my loving, supportive girlfriend, but I guess that's not who she is. She's always known how much a career in science means to me and how badly I've wanted this the entire time she's known me. I don't understand how she could ask me to give it up like it was nothing. I don't want to believe that she's being selfish. I think she's just in love, just like me. I'm feeling incredibly torn. One half of me knows that I would hate myself if I gave up this opportunity, but what if this girl is meant to be my wife? What if she's my future instead of Princeton? Story 32. My loser Sil gave my 13-year-old son a tattoo, so I got her arrested. Look, I love my wife with all my heart, but her sister is by far one of the most idiotic, pathetic people on this planet. I don't even understand how she and my wife came from the same family, since her sister is such a waste of space and a complete failure in life. She is only 20 years old, but she has never had a job and has has an ongoing nasty drug problem. My wife is a saint, and she loves her sister dearly despite her flaws. She gives her sister money and lets her stay with us whenever she needs, even though I, despite her sister, love my wife more than anything, and I try to support all her choices. Now, after everything that's happened, I realize just how wrong I was to let my wife keep enabling her sister's disgusting behavior. My wife and I have a 13-year-old son. He's a great kid, and he loves his aunt even though she's a dirtbag. To be fair, she was always pretty kind to our son, and he genuinely cares for her. My wife would tell me that her sister said she felt like my son was one of the only lights in her life, so I never let my hate for her separate the two from each other, since they had a close family tie. I was an idiot to think this, and I should have put my son before her feelings. I reached my limit this week when my wife came to me and told me she thinks our son had gotten a tattoo. I thought she was joking at first since he's just a kid, but after confronting my son about it, he fessed up and said that his Auntie Kay had given it to him as a gift since she had just bought a tattoo gun off of Amazon. The tattoo is small, it's a tiny football on my son's thigh, but it's a real permanent tattoo that she did in our garage without my or my wife's consent. I was livid when I found out. Even though everyone was home, I marched into the living room where my SIL was lying down watching TV. I had found her machine in the garage, and I picked it up and threw it hard at her stomach. My SEL got up and started cursing at me, and I gave it right back to her. I told her she had no right to permanently alter my son's body like that, and that I had enough of her crap. I told her to pack her crap and get the hell out of my house before I called the cops. My wife was crying and trying to get in between us, but I had listened to her enough, and now it was my turn to deal with her sister. Her sister refused to leave, so I went through with calling the cops. I told them my SIL had abused my minor son and was trespassing on my property. The entire time my wife sobbed in the background. The night ended with my SIL lying on my front lawn, face down in handcuffs, as the cops read her rights. Since that night, my son, who witnessed everything, and my wife have been refusing to talk to me. I'm going to give them some time to cool off, and even though things are tense, I'm proud of myself for finally putting my foot down when it came to my trashy SIL.
Story 33. My Mile kidnapped my baby and has taken him overseas. I have never been through anything as terrifying as this in my entire life, and I'm scared I will never see my newborn baby again for as long as I live. My Mile has always been an iffy character. She struggles with a few different mental issues, and she has been on and off bipolar medication for her entire life. She and my husband were always very close, and he tried everything he could to take care of his mom. Now, I wish he had prioritized me and our child over his crazy mom, and I feel completely betrayed by my husband. We had our baby boy about 4 months ago. He is the sweetest, happiest baby anyone could ask for. When I came home from the hospital, I was shocked to see that my husband had let his mother move in while I was giving birth to our son. She had been staying there for about a week. I want to say that I couldn't believe my husband would move her in without telling me, but looking back now, he was always putting his mother's needs over mine. As I said, my MIL struggles with bipolar disorder, and I have personally watched her have multiple public mental breakdowns in the 4 years that I've been part of my husband's family. I was so nervous when I came home with my newborn son and saw that we could be stuck in the house with a woman who I knew was unstable. I should have listened to my instincts and left the same day I came home, but I was weak, and now it's too late. It's just too late. I had only been home for about a week when my MIL started talking about bringing my baby to her homeland so she could show him to her extended family. She was talking manically, and I asked my husband to please calm her down and explain to her that the baby needed to be at home, safe with me. A newborn shouldn't be flying at all, let alone overseas. My husband reassured me that he had spoken with his mother, but she continued to act strangely around me and my baby, until finally, 2 days ago, I woke up in the morning to find my son's crib empty and my MIL nowhere to be found. There was something deep inside me that said, "This is your fault. You could have stopped this." When I saw my son's empty crib, I called my husband in hysterics and told him she had taken him. He didn't even believe me till he came home himself and saw them both gone. It took almost a full day, but finally, my husband managed to get in touch with his mom, and sure enough, she had packed a bag and stolen our baby in the middle of the night to take him back to her home country. I listened to my manic MIL on my husband's speakerphone, saying how much the baby was loving his home country. It was obvious my MIL was disconnected from reality when she started trying to convince us to pick up and move to her home county so she and my baby never needed to leave their real home. Listening to the call felt surreal and nightmarish, and I still can't believe my newborn baby is somewhere across the globe, in the care of a dangerous lunatic. Story 34. My boyfriend threw my puppy against the wall during an argument. Please help. My boyfriend is ex-military. I always knew that he had extreme anger issues, but never in my life would I think that he would take it out on an innocent animal like I watched him do the other night. I feel completely traumatized after witnessing him abuse my 3-month-old puppy in the way he did, and I have no idea what to do next. I feel completely trapped and terrified. As I said, my boyfriend has always had some anger issues, and he usually gets angry at me when he thinks other men are checking me out in public, or he sees that random guys have followed me on Instagram. We have had so many fights where I have tried to assure him that I would never cheat on him, and he is the only man in my life, but he always ends up screaming at me and calling me a liar and saying that I like the attention of other guys, and if I didn't, I would dress differently or delete my Instagram. Over the 8 months that we've been dating, I have gotten so used to his outbursts and his constant screaming, even though I know it's totally unhealthy. I know for sure that I'm in a toxic relationship. I want to leave him, but I am truly scared of him. He is ex-military and an extremely strong, connected man. I fear that if I leave him, he will track me down and hurt me physically, or worse. We don't live together, but he spends a lot of time at my apartment. 2 weeks ago, I adopted a German Shepherd puppy. I remember seeing him at the shelter and instantly falling in love with him. Ever since I brought him home, my boyfriend boyfriend has been complaining about him. He says that he stinks, he's too loud, and that I should have never gotten a dog. I love my boyfriend, but I love my puppy in a different way since he is just an innocent little animal, and it's killing me that I brought this innocent baby into a dangerous situation. The other night, my boyfriend was screaming at me because he had noticed that I had a new male Instagram follower. He was throwing and breaking things usual, and insisting that I didn't care about him because I wasn't changing my ways. I really was just exhausted since I had a long day. Honestly, I was just exhausted with him. I wasn't really engaging in the fight. I was just laying on my bed staring at the ceiling, trying to dissociate. I guess this only made him more upset because the next thing I know, he picked up my puppy so hard and fast that the poor thing literally squealed out of fear. My boyfriend screamed in my face, "So is this what I have to do for you to give a damn?" And to my horror, he hurled my innocent baby directly at the wall. My poor baby made another squealing noise, and I will never be able to forget the way that he ran away from us into a corner, shaking and whimpering. I started crying and trying to console my puppy, but he was still scared since my boyfriend was still in the room yelling at us both. I just cowered in the corner with my dog until my boyfriend eventually left us alone and went to sleep. I'm scared. I'm scared for me and my puppy. I want to get as far as possible as I can from my boyfriend. He's a monster, and I cannot believe that I allowed him to take out his anger on my poor innocent baby boy. I know now that I need to do everything I can to protect myself and my new baby before it's too late.
Story 35. My girlfriend of 5 years cheated on me, so I got with her best friend. I worked as a pizza delivery guy at the time. I came home from work one day with chocolates and flowers for her. We had been together for 5 years at this point, and she was screwing another guy in our bed. As soon as I entered my apartment and heard banging noises, I knew I snuck into the frame of my bedroom door and witnessed the act with my own 2 eyes. They never even noticed I was there. I was so hurt by the situation, which I should have confronted head on, that I left my own house and went to my buddy's house and smoked Zaza. He told me I should let her know I caught her and see how she reacted, but I didn't. I was just trying to rationalize what I did wrong a lot. Several hours later, I returned home, gave her the chocolate and flowers, and continued like nothing was wrong. I was a fool. Needless to say, she got ready for her job, which was a night shift security guard, and left around 7 p.m. I sat there for several hours crying after she left. Around 10 p.m., our roommate called and asked if I could come up to her job and see what was going on with her car. The roommate is also my significant other's best friend. I went up there, figured out the issue with that car, and got her back to the house. After the roommate got home, she cooked dinner, spaghetti and garlic bread. I ate and sat on the couch. I proceeded to stay on that couch knowing what had occurred in my bed earlier during the day. About 3 a.m., I had the biggest emotional breakdown. I began crying to the point I could no longer breathe. As I sat in the dark, crying, the roommate came and sat down beside me, pulled my head into her lap, and rubbed my head. I'm not quite sure how long we stayed there like that, but I eventually fell asleep. I woke up the following day on the couch with my significant other waking me up. I proceeded to go through this day as well, holding in my emotions. After she left for work again around 7 p.m., I just sat there for hours. Eventually that evening I wrote a letter addressing my feelings and the cheating. It was about 3 pages long. The roommate came in shortly after 10 p.m. and did her evening routine. What happened next surprised me. As I lay on the couch, she came and began to talk to me. She stated she could tell something was wrong, so I told her about the cheating that I had witnessed and all that. This next part is the most shocking because I wasn't expecting it. It also should have been a huge red flag. The roommate asked me, "Do you want to bang me?" to get back at her. I never answered. Yes, I just jumped on her. We did many different things that night, so here is the part where shit goes down. I fell asleep on the couch after that night, only to be woken up by arguing around 7 a.m. hours. My significant other had gotten home, and her and the roommate were arguing. The roommate confronted my partner about cheating. The words that came out of the roommate's mouth next were stupid. "That's why I let your man fill me up while you were working beach." Well, that is exactly what happened to fight. The fight carried on with me trying to break it up. Entry was then made by 2 cops. Roommate got tased. My partner got tackled. Both of them went to jail. Several hours later, the roommate returned after her mother bonded her out. She told me we would talk about this situation later and left for work. My significant other then came by with her sister and dad around 11 p.m. that night and packed all her clothes and other property. I also had her take the bed because I didn't want it. She left that evening only saying, "I guess you know I'm breaking up with you." I just shook my head. Yeah, and she left. So we're gonna fast forward a little to about 8 months later. The roommate was also still staying with me still. Roommate goes into labor. I take her to the hospital, and after 14 glorious hours of labor, we welcomed our beautiful daughter into this world. After my daughter was born, I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and across the parking lot, I noticed someone who looks quite familiar, loading a baby in a pickup truck. I shrugged it off, sure I was overanalyzing the situation. I had myself convinced it wasn't my ex. Well, I was wrong. About 3 months later I get served with some civil paperwork from an attorney requesting I submit to a paternity test. After looking through all the paperwork with an attorney of my own, he was able to provide me with a date the child was born, which was a day before my daughter's birth. I knew then I did see her at the hospital that day. I took the paternity test. I was indeed the father. After a lengthy child custody case, I pay $420 a month in child support and get my son 2 weekends out of the month. I'm also married to the roommate and have a 7-year-old daughter and son now. I did indeed feel like a piece of shit how that whole incident unfolded, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. A little advice: communication in a relationship is key. Also, if you don't want no babies, use protection. Aldo, don't cheat, it's just not good.
Story 36. Ada. For wanting to leave my boyfriend after seeing how disrespectful and insecure his mom acts towards the other women in her family. I met my boyfriend's mom just 4 days ago, and I'm unsure if I'm overreacting by considering breaking up due to her behavior at dinner. I need to use a throwaway account for this because I'm feeling overwhelmed. My boyfriend and I have been in a long-distance relationship for 2 years. We initially met while on vacation, and during that time, I met his family through video calls. Due to my intensive degree program, I couldn't visit in person. However, now that I've finished my program and can work remotely, I decided to move to his city, get my own place, and continue our relationship in person. I looked at apartments and then had dinner with his family for the first time. Everything started well. I met his parents, brothers, and their spouses. His mom was friendly until we began dinner. The oldest brother's wife had prepared an appetizer, which was delicious. However, his mom took a bite, made a displeased noise, and acted as if she had difficulty swallowing it. She commented that it had a different taste and made a disgusted face. There was nothing wrong with the appetizer. She then went to the kitchen and returned with the same appetizer, saying, "It's good I made the same one just in case." I expected the sister-in-law to say something, but she remained silent. No one addressed the issue, and conversations continued as if nothing happened. His mom, along with the other spouses, cleared our plates, which still had the original appetizer, and served her version on new plates, instructing us to eat. It was the same appetizer, with no difference. I even preferred the sister-in-law's version because it had more vanilla. I was shocked by her actions. Dinner continued, and all the dishes were prepared by his mom. She kept asking how the food was, and made passive-aggressive comments about dishes that the other daughters-in-law had previously made. I didn't say anything at the time due to my astonishment, but after dinner, I asked my boyfriend about the situation. He explained that his mom is very passionate about her cooking, and doesn't like anyone to outshine her. When I asked if this happens at every family dinner, he confirmed it, mentioning that if someone has made a dish before or prepares one during dinner, his mom tries to outdo them. He assured me that his brother's wives don't take it personally because they understand her behavior and believe it stems from her passion for cooking. My boyfriend emphasized that, aside from this, his mom is entirely normal. I asked him when this behavior began, and he said it started when his eldest brother brought his first serious girlfriend home. Since his eldest brother is 8 years older than him, this behavior has persisted throughout all of their relationships. I questioned whether his mom's behavior was acceptable, and he seemed a bit defensive, replying that she's just passionate about making good food. I've been reflecting on the dinner and comments repeatedly, and I can't imagine subjecting myself to such a situation. My boyfriend and I are discussing marriage, our future, and children, and I'm becoming increasingly anxious. His brother's wives have endured this treatment regarding their cooking since the beginning of their relationships with their spouse's mother, and no one has spoken out about it. Not them, not their husbands, not his dad, and not my boyfriend. How can this be okay? I'm uncertain if I can handle this level of insult at every family dinner. If my boyfriend and I progress in our relationship, does this mean I can never cook anything? Will she always try to outdo me? Will she make negative comments about my cooking? I'm seriously considering breaking up with him because of this situation.
Story 37. Try and damage my car? I'll let you destroy your own in the process. A few weeks ago, I found myself parked next to a car that was, as far as I could tell, identical to mine. Same make, Subaru, model, Outback, color, muddy green, and probably same year, although I'm not an expert. Close enough, probably. It's a popular car. I pass them all the time. My car has a large parking lot ding on the driver's side rear door panel. No idea how it got there. Probably some kid opened his door a little too quickly, forcefully, and it smacked into my car. These things happen. It doesn't bother me, and I've been putting off getting it fixed. Yet I'm a little sorry that I didn't do it because it would have saved the idiot a lot of grief. Me and the idiot both exit the Walmart with full carts, and he's about 100 ft ahead of me. As we approach, I'm thinking it looks like he's heading in the same direction. I even plan on jokingly saying, "Nice car," in Subaru solidarity. Thought looking back, I'm happy I didn't. I should mention here that I've already clicked my clicker to unlock the car. It'll be important later. Now that I definitely should not have done. This is the point where the idiot notices the large ding on his car's door, and he takes offense at that. To be fair, that ding is pretty ugly. The paint is gone where the tip or something from whatever hit it was centered, and there's a scratch leading off to one side. I think it kinda looks like a spoon in the middle of a small, shallow cereal bowl. So anyway, he gets pissed, like screaming things like "son of a female dog" and "it's a freaking brand new car" and stuff. I think he looked up at the windshield, hoping to find a note or something. But this all happened so fast that my brain might be making up details to fit into the blank spots. I've actually slowed down a bit by now because it's uncomfortable being around someone so enraged, and to be honest, I was super confused about what was going on. For a second, I actually forgot which car was whose. It didn't make sense for him to be hopping mad about my car having a dent. I think my brain was going, wow, two exactly same cars getting huge parking lot dings in them. What are the odds? But you know that weird twisting feeling where you reorient yourself from the confusion and snap back to reality? That happened. I realized that he had made the same mistake that I made, and so I did what anyone would naturally do. I called out, "Hey, it's okay, that's my car," which backfired spectacularly. The idiot must have thought that I meant, "That's my car's door that smacked into yours," which only made him madder. He started yelling things like, "What the hell?" and more of, "It's a freaking brand new car," and more of the same. I tried to explain, not exactly easy from a distance, and definitely a lot harder when someone is raging at you. And that's when he opened the driver's side rear door on my car, i.e., the one with the large ding. And then he slammed it into his car, hard. It made a dent, took a little paint off the edge of my door too, but I didn't notice that until later. So at that point I yelled, "Hey, stop that," which only made him more upset, because he responded with, "Oh, you don't like that? Shut the hell up," or words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing here. So, I guess in a nutshell, that's my malicious compliance. I did exactly what he said. Shut up, and let him slam my car door into his car a couple more times, and I let him try to kick it too. There wasn't enough room between the two cars for a good roundhouse, so he had to be satisfied with a weak sauce knee to the rear quarter panel. But kudos for trying, idiot. You gave it your best shot. Seeing him suddenly realize that he had been beating the crap out of his own car was truly one of the funniest and most satisfying moments I've ever witnessed. Story 38. I gave my boyfriend an ultimatum because of how insecure his mom acts. I met my boyfriend's mom just 4 days ago, and I'm unsure if I'm overreacting by considering breaking up due to her behavior at dinner. I need to use a throwaway account for this because I'm feeling overwhelmed. My boyfriend and I have been in a long-distance relationship for 2 years. We initially met while on vacation, and during that time, I met his family through video calls. Due to my intensive degree program, I couldn't visit in person. However, now that I've finished my program and can work remotely, I decided to move to his city, get my own place, and continue our relationship in person. I looked at apartments, and then had dinner with his family for the first time. Everything started well. I met his parents, brothers, and their spouses. His mom was friendly until we began dinner. The oldest brother's wife had prepared an appetizer, which was delicious. However, his mom took a bite, made a displeased noise, and acted as if she had difficulty swallowing it. She commented that it had a different taste, and made a disgusted face. There was nothing wrong with the appetizer. She then went to the kitchen and returned with the same appetizer, saying, "It's good I made the same one just in case." I expected the sister-in-law to say something, but she remained silent. No one addressed the issue, and conversations continued as if nothing happened. His mom, along with the other spouses, cleared our plates, which still had the original appetizer, and served her version on new plates, instructing us to eat. It was the same appetizer, with no difference. I even preferred the sister-in-law's version because it had more vanilla. I was shocked by her actions. Dinner continued, and all the dishes were prepared by his mom. She kept asking how the food was, and made passive-aggressive comments about dishes that the other daughters-in-law had previously made. I didn't say anything at the time due to my astonishment, but after dinner, I asked my boyfriend about the situation. He explained that his mom is very passionate about her cooking, and doesn't like anyone to outshine her. When I asked if this happens at every family dinner, he confirmed it, mentioning that if someone has made a dish before or prepares one during dinner, his mom tries to outdo them. He assured me that his brother's wives don't take it personally because they understand her behavior and believe it stems from her passion for cooking. My boyfriend emphasized that, aside from this, his mom is entirely normal. I asked him when this behavior began, and he said it started when his eldest brother brought his first serious girlfriend home. Since his eldest brother is 8 years older than him, this behavior has persisted throughout all of their relationships. I questioned whether his mom's behavior was acceptable, and he seemed a bit defensive, replying that she's just passionate about making good food. I've been reflecting on the dinner and comments repeatedly, and I can't imagine subjecting myself to such a situation. My boyfriend and I are discussing marriage, our future, and children, and I'm becoming increasingly anxious. His brother's wives have endured this treatment regarding their cooking since the beginning of their relationships with their spouse's mother, and no one has spoken out about it. Not them, not their husbands, not his dad, and not my boyfriend. How can this be okay? I'm uncertain if I can handle this level of insult at every family dinner. If my boyfriend and I progress in our relationship, does this mean I can never cook anything? Will she always try to outdo me? Will she make negative comments about my cooking? I'm seriously considering breaking up with him because of this situation.
Story 39. Tifu. By ghost hunting in my apartment and uncovering my boyfriend's dark secret. This feels like a sick joke, and I truly cannot believe that I am living through this right now. I have been with my boyfriend for about 8 months now. We've had sort of a whirlwind romance and fell in love pretty fast after meeting. He is very suave and persuasive, and he can talk me into anything pretty easily. It was his idea to move in together after we had only been dating for a couple months, but honestly, it all turned out pretty well. Until now. It was hard to find an affordable 2-bedroom in our area, and I felt like I struck gold when I found a random Facebook post from a woman renting out an entire level of her classic Victorian house. It was a giant, beautiful old house in a historical town, and it was perfect for our location and budget needs. Our landlady seemed like a bit of a crazy old lady, and when we signed our lease, she rambled about all the other people who had lived on the property before, but I just sort of tuned her out. At first, things were fine, and I loved my new apartment. Yet after we had been living there for a couple of months, things started to get weird. I started to hear lots of random noises during the nighttime. It sounded like people talking in our living room, and I would even hear banging noises. I would try to wake up my boyfriend during the nighttime so he could hear the disturbances as well, but he's a heavy sleeper and easily waved me off. The other night, I could barely sleep because there was so much noise coming from the kitchen. It literally sounded like someone was walking around in there, banging around pots and pans. I reached my limit the other morning when I woke up and walked out into the kitchen to find all of the cabinet doors pulled open. I called my boyfriend crying, but he just said it was probably my cat or something. I tried to tell my boyfriend on the phone that day that I needed to do something about this, and that I wanted to buy a ghost hunting camera. My boyfriend literally cried, laughing on the phone when I said this and I hung up to cry. I was feeling so silly and scared and alone, but I went through with my plan. I bought an affordable ghost hunting camera off of Amazon and set it up in my kitchen and living room. I didn't tell my boyfriend about the camera since he laughed off the idea anyway. I let the camera record for a week as I continued to have sleeping problems due to the noise. Finally, during the weekend, I sat down and rewatched all the footage. I could have never anticipated the heartbreaking discovery I was about to make. First of all, I saw no movement on the footage at all until the very last night. So the night before I checked the recordings, I watched my boyfriend suddenly walk into the frame in the middle of the night, about 2 a.m. It was so strange since he's such a heavy sleeper. I almost dropped my phone when I saw him open the front door and lead his ex inside. I could have puked as I watched them walk over to the couch together and hook up as I slept in the room down the hall. I ghost hunted instead of finding proof of my ghost. I was left with proof of my disgusting, cheating boyfriend. When he comes home, I'm going to confront him, but I can't help but feel disturbed knowing that some of the noises I've been hearing were actually the sound of my boyfriend and his ex together in our living room. Story 40. Ada for not paying my parents back after they were scammed out of $20,000. My parents and I have never had a good relationship. They always favored my younger brother and treated me like some kind of maid. They never really made me feel loved and expected the world from me when I was still a child. They doted on my little brother and treated him like he could do no wrong. For example, I was the only one with chores, while my little brother never had to clean up after himself. When I was 16 and my brother was 13, one of my chores was to clean his entire room for him, literally. I remember having a huge fight with my parents after this, where they yelled at me and told me as his sister, I was there to serve my brother, because that was what God expected of eldest sisters. Anyway, you get the point. My parents are awful people who raised a little spoiled brat. I moved out the night before I turned 18. Now it's been 3 years, and I haven't heard a word from them since I left. I knew they wouldn't care, but after I left, I felt like they got the perfect little life they always wanted. They were finally a happy family with their golden child, and no one else. I built a comfortable life for myself. I went to trade school and earned a high-paying position in my industry after working extra hard at my craft for years. I was traumatized, honestly, after my lonely childhood, and I have saved as much money as possible since I always knew there would never be anyone else to save me or help me in a bad situation. Like I said, I hadn't heard from my parents in about 3 years since I moved out in the middle of the night, but of course, that changed the moment they needed something from me. My father contacted me the other day, and when I didn't answer, he left a voicemail explaining my family situation. He told me that they had been taken advantage of in some kind of electronic money scam, and that my parents had been robbed of their entire savings, about $20,000. I can't say I was totally surprised at this information. My parents were never the sharpest tools in the shed, and I wasn't shocked that someone could fool them like this. My dad kept calling me and leaving me sob stories. He would even berate me for betraying my family in their time of need. I literally laughed out loud when my father left me a message saying they were going to use that money for my brother's college tuition, and that it was my fault that my innocent brother wouldn't be able to go to his dream college. I thought it was a hilarious reality check for all of them, and I still have zero plans on helping them out financially. I blocked my entire family after listening to my dad's last message and took myself out to a fancy dinner to congratulate myself on separating myself from such an idiotic, messy family.
Story 41. My husband is blackmailing me and is trying to force me to get rid of my baby, and it's not the first time. I don't know what to do. I'm facing a tough situation and need advice. My husband did something that has left me feeling lost. He convinced me to get rid of the baby when we found out our first baby was a boy, and now he's saying we should do the same for our second child after learning the gender. At the start of our relationship, my husband seemed excited about becoming a dad. He talked about how ready he was for fatherhood, and I could see his happiness when I got pregnant. But things changed when we found out the first baby's gender. He became distant and cold, saying we should focus on our careers and that being parents could wait. I didn't want to lose him, so I agreed to get rid of it. Recently, I got pregnant again, and we were both thrilled until we found out it's another boy. My husband's response was to suggest another one, claiming he's not ready again. During a heated argument, he confessed that he doesn't want boys because he thinks they are morally and physically degenerated and inferior in every single way. I'm shocked and don't know how to handle this. I realized that my husband hates men and actively discriminates against them. He has hurt men physically before, always in defense of women. He has a business with an all-female team and says he hires based on merit, but I'm starting to doubt that. He even talked about us moving to a farm in the middle of nowhere so he doesn't have to see another man again. I'm torn between my love for my husband, who is everything I want in the world, except for this one problem, and the life of my son. My husband has given me an ultimatum: choose him or the baby. I feel trapped and don't see any other options. I need help and guidance on what to do in this tough situation.
Story 42. My jealous Sil wore a white gown to my wedding, so I ruined her dress, plus updates. My Sil has always acted kind of cold toward me, but I never thought her jealous behavior would ever go this far. I started dating my husband 5 years ago, and we've been engaged for about a year and a half now. I get along with everyone in my husband's family, except for his younger sister, Alyssa, who is currently 20 years old. The rest of his family was always welcoming and polite to me, but every time I see her, she gave me dirty looks and talked to whoever was around me instead of talking straight to me. She has such an annoying habit of speaking directly to my husband while I'm standing right next to him. This literally happens every time I see her. So much so that I asked my husband about Alyssa's behavior one day. All he said was that she had always been really attached to him while growing up since he was her only big brother. Look, I have siblings too, but I don't let my attachments to them lead me to disrespect their partners. Alyssa is very reliant on my husband and calls him almost every day, and gets upset if he doesn't stay on the phone with her for at least an hour. Even though it was an ongoing issue in our marriage, I just let her bullcrap slide since it was really the only problem in my relationship. I figured Alyssa was just young and needy, and that her treatment of me and her clinginess to my husband might improve with age. Well, looks like I was completely wrong, because the minute my husband and I got engaged, her behavior got 100% worse. For example, when my husband and I held a dinner at our house to announce our engagement, Alyssa burst out in tears the moment we shared the happy news. Mind you, this is a 20-year-old woman crying her eyes out at my dinner table saying that she was never going to see her big bro again. At one point, she even said, she doesn't deserve this. My husband's mom just took her home after congratulating us, but she basically ruined the entire dinner out of her own selfishness. During the wedding planning, Alyssa would act the same, self-absorbed way if I tried to include her in anything. I tried to invite her to try on bridesmaid dresses, but she spent the whole time texting my husband and FaceTiming her friends at full volume. It was ridiculous. There she was in the dress shop surrounded by me and my friends, and she was talking loudly on the phone to her friends about how bored she was and how she would rather be anywhere else. I started to get incredibly annoyed with Alyssa's worsening treatment of me, so I stopped including her in anything until the wedding. After she wasn't invited to my bachelorette party, she called my husband sobbing, claiming that I was bullying her. Honestly, I overheard this call, and hearing my husband baby his grown sister over the phone made my skin crawl. Apparently, Alyssa was demanding that I apologize to her for not inviting her, but when my husband told me this, I laughed, thinking he was joking. I took this opportunity to tell my husband how sick I was of her immature bullcrap, and that I didn't want to hear about her again until after the wedding. He seemed frustrated with me, and that week he spent a lot of time on the phone with her. Whatever, I had wedding planning to do anyway. Like I said, Alyssa is really the only topic my husband and I disagree on, so I planned to let sleeping dogs lie until after the wedding. I hadn't heard from Alyssa in weeks before the day of our wedding, and I should have known that she was planning another selfish stunt to make another day all about her. I just never thought she would be so cruel and bold about it. The only thing worse about what she did to me on the day of my wedding was my husband's reaction. Update 1. In my initial post, I went into detail about my Esil's extreme jealousy towards me and her clingy nature towards my husband. She had always been nasty to me, and whenever the attention was on me, she would make a scene to get it back on her. She and my husband are very close, and they spend an hour on the phone every day. If not, she becomes upset. Honestly, looking back, I see all the red flags, and I should have put my foot down about Alyssa long before the wedding. Anyway, the weeks before the wedding, I hadn't heard from Alyssa, and I was busy preparing things for the big day. My husband and I were super excited, and it felt like there was nothing that could ruin the day for us. Boy, was I wrong. As long as Alyssa was in attendance, our wedding was getting destroyed. The day of my wedding, I woke up ecstatic. I had no idea how painfully the day would end. I was in the dressing room getting my makeup done when Alyssa arrived. All my bridesmaids were in good moods, all getting ready and supporting me. When Alyssa arrived, she bragged about how she had spent her last 2 paychecks on her dress because she needed to look her best for my special day. I will never forget the smug smile that spread across her face when she unzipped her dress bag and revealed a long white gown. It looked exactly like a wedding dress. I could barely react. Yet again, Alyssa was trying to steal my thunder, and I was in shock at her audacity. Before I could ever respond, my maid of honor, who is also my best friend, started laying into her. She screamed at Alyssa for thinking she could wear a wedding dress to her own sister-in-law's wedding and called her a selfish, crazy female dog. Alyssa looked at me and said, "Are you really gonna let her talk to me that way?" All I said was, "Yup," and Alyssa grabbed her dress and ran out crying like a child. I texted my MIL to ask her to try and get her under control, and she said she would try and find her. Anyway, I figured that was the end of that, though I was sorely mistaken. I didn't see any of my wedding guests until it was time for me to walk down the aisle. I wish so bad I had double-checked that Alyssa had changed or gone home, because she wholly ruined this moment for me. They opened the curtains for me to walk out, and of course, the very first thing my eyes went to was Alyssa, standing in the front row with her ridiculous white gown splayed out over the other guests' feet. When I met her gaze, she gave me that same smug, hateful smile, knowing I had no choice but to continue the ceremony with her standing there in a wedding dress. Update 2. I read my vows with tears in my eyes, but they weren't tears of happiness. I felt Alyssa's evil eyes burning holes in my back my entire time up at the altar. She truly robbed me of what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. After we walked out to my reception, I made a beeline to Alyssa, who was still in her gown, and asked her what the hell she thought she was doing. She literally laughed in my face and said, "Ooh, did I hit a nerve? I deserve to feel beautiful one last time before you take my brother away from me forever, okay?" I told her she was embarrassing herself, and please go change or leave the venue. She started raising her voice at me, saying she was there for my husband, not his old hag. This comment pushed me over the edge. I walked away to try and calm down, and saw my husband heading towards us. I thought he was coming to comfort me, but I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when he walked right past me and took a crying Alyssa into a tight hug. I just looked at my husband, realizing I had no sadness left inside me, just rage. He held her tightly and stroked her hair. I could see him glancing over at me and then looking at her and saying, "Sorry, I had it. I had it with both of them." We had a type of lukewarm tomato soup served at our wedding called gazpacho. I was numb. I didn't care about my marriage, any wedding, or any social norms anymore. I walked over to the huge bowl of soup and picked it up. I carried it over to Alyssa and my husband, and I tossed the entire bowl over both of them. Alyssa screamed at the top of her lungs as the soup destroyed her big gaudy dress. If I hadn't been so numb, I would have burst out laughing. My husband yelled at me and immediately started cleaning his sister off. I just turned on my heels and walked out of my own wedding. I took an Uber to a hotel and turned off my phone. It was one of the most depressing moments of my life, laying there on the crappy hotel bed in my wedding dress. The only thing I could do was cry. I knew I had flown off the handle and made a scene, but as soon as my husband walked past me to comfort his sister, I knew our relationship was over anyway. I'm going to reach out to my friends and a divorce lawyer tomorrow. I may have broken a record for the shortest marriage ever.
Story 43. My racist neighbors are harassing us just because we're child-free. My husband and I thought we were completely overthinking, but turns out we were right all along. About 2 years ago, we bought our first house. We were really excited to leave apartment life behind. However, things didn't go as planned. It all began with our neighbors behind our house. They were mowing their lawn way over the property line, and they had a big dog that they'd let out without a leash or a fence. One day, their dog charged at our small puppy, and my wife had to step in to protect our little dog. The husband didn't help at all. So, we decided to get a fence installed to keep our yard safe for our pets. However, this made our neighbors very angry. They believed that children should be able to play everywhere, even though we never saw their kids playing outside. They started damaging our fence with their lawnmower and even threw trash into our yard. We couldn't understand why they were so mad until I overheard the wife talking to her mother. She said, "They don't even have kids. They took that house from a family who deserves it. Our house is small and not really suitable for kids, but it's perfect for us, our dog, and our 2 cats." We thought this was just their attitude, but then we began to hear gossip from a few other parents in the neighborhood. They were saying things like, they don't have kids, so they don't belong here. It was mostly a few parents who had kids of the same age playing together. Some people can be judgmental, but most parents don't really care if you have kids or not, so we didn't pay much attention to it. Then, a few weeks ago, my husband and I were arguing while carrying groceries into the house. We were just frustrated with each other, and it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, the police showed up at our door. Our area has strict domestic violence laws, so the police usually make an arrest when they receive a domestic call. However, it was clear that there was no danger in our situation. I went back inside, and we quickly checked our Ring camera's live feed, which caught the police officer's conversation. One officer said, "This was nothing. If my neighbors called the police every time my wife and I argued, they'd be here every day." A sergeant responded, "This was a huge waste of our time. I'm going to talk to the person who called. We should never have been called here. I'm tired of coming to this neighborhood." The sergeant went across the street, and we couldn't hear exactly what was said, but it was clear that he wasn't happy with the neighbors who had called. The husband started shouting, "We have kids! They shouldn't have to hear this!" The sergeant said something that made him quiet down, and then wrote him a ticket for making a false report. We were really upset that the police had been called to our home. We knew it could have ended badly for one of us, all over nothing. We talked to our next-door neighbor, who we really like, and they were getting ready to sell their house. They told us, "Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but my ex-husband and I had problems with the same neighbors for years. We didn't want to get involved, but there's a group of parents who talk about you all the time and are trying to make you leave. They think you shouldn't be here because you don't have kids. We had issues with them because my ex-husband is black, and they didn't want black kids in the neighborhood. The cops used to be called all the time when our kids were playing outside, so the police know about these parents. Now, they give out tickets every time they're called, and it turns out to be nothing." We couldn't believe it. We had confirmation that there really was a group of parents trying to push us out, and they were also racist. Later that day, we saw the person who had called the police talking to our next-door neighbor, who was furious with him. She said, "I've told you over and over not to call the police for every little thing. I have black kids who have black friends, and the last thing I need is a tragedy because of you. You called the police for nothing, and my kids could have been hurt." We're not sure what to do at this point. We're surrounded by mean, racist parents who seem determined to keep calling the police on us until we leave. This morning, we caught the neighbors behind us, letting their large dog into our fenced yard to poop, which was trespassing. They left their dog in our yard and only came back inside when my husband confronted them. He called animal control and provided the Ring footage to the same sergeant who had come earlier. The police and animal control arrived, and the wife was caught trying to sneak the dog back into her house. My wife and I decided that the next time they call the police on us, we will provide them with the Ring footage of them letting their dog on our property. If the cops give us the choice, we will certainly press charges, and since they already have gotten ticketed for the false calls, we should have a strong case against them. Story 44. My brother missed his wedding and blamed me. Now my family hates me. I still can't believe this happened or that I'm taking all the blame for it. My brother was supposed to get married a week ago, but he never arrived at the wedding venue on time. I know why, and because I was technically with him for a night, my family thinks it was my responsibility to take care of him. Well, the night before his wedding, my brother called all of his friends and talked about having one last day of freedom before he married the old ball and chain. He apparently wanted one last night as a single man. Mind you, we already had a bachelor party, so I don't know what gave him the idea to do another one. His friends were all up for it though, so we all drove to a strip club of his choice. Something about having to live with the same woman for the rest of his life gave him the ick. I reminded him the entire time that he shouldn't drink too much, because the very next day was his wedding. He told me to lay off, and he knew what he was doing. At some point I did stop telling him, and just watched him go to town with all the alcohol he was drinking. I'm not much of a drinker. In fact, I try to stay away from it as much as possible, so I only drank one beer, and called it a night. Everyone else was insanely wasted though. I had to call Ubers for the friends, and drove the groom groomsmen and my brother to his house. I went back to my own house where I slept soundly. The next day, I went about my day before getting ready for my brother's wedding. I'm actually not one of his groomsmen. I was just a guest, which is why I don't think it's fair that all the responsibility latched onto me out of nowhere. If anything, our older brother should have been blamed since he's the best man and was tasked with making sure the groom attended the wedding. So I drove up to the wedding, and my dad instantly started asking me about my brother's whereabouts. I told him I haven't seen him since last night when I dropped him off at his house after drinking for hours. That's when they told me no one from the groom's party was here, and they've been trying to contact them for hours. An hour goes by, and my parents try to delay the wedding as much as possible. At this point, the bride finds out that her husband is nowhere to be found, and immediately thinks the worst. He got cold feet and was standing her up at her wedding. I wouldn't put it past my brother with the way he was acting yesterday. He seemed like he did not want to get married, and I actually felt bad for her. The wedding was delayed as much as possible, and my father went to get my brother from his house, which was 2 hours away. The sun was setting by the time we got word that my father had picked him up and was on his way. My brother talked to the bride, who had been crying all day. Her makeup was smeared and her hair got all messy. I tried to comfort her by saying that he definitely was not thinking of leaving her, and he just overslept because he had a crazy night out. But she didn't believe anything I said. Because we were there all day, the guests ate the food, the priest had grown tired of waiting, and the bride even changed out of her wedding dress. It was not an enjoyable wedding. My brother came, and instead of hugging his crying bride, he sucker punched me. I yelled at him, asking what the hell was wrong with him, and he started blaming me for making him miss his wedding. I saw my father looking disappointed at me as well. We started arguing back and forth, and it wasn't until the bride got in between us that the screaming match stopped. I had told everybody who asked what happened. My brother went out, partied too hard. I dropped him off at his house with all his groomsmen, went home, and then came to the wedding. Everybody had believed me, but when my dad told this to my brother, as he was berating him during the 2-hour car ride, my brother spit out a different story to save his own behind. Apparently, it was my idea to go party, and he didn't want to go, but I dragged him. He said I was the one that had taken him to a strip club and said he needed to let loose before he married the old ball and chain. Then, I got him wasted on purpose, because I wanted him to miss his wedding since I was jealous of his relationship. He told everyone that I was the one who wanted to marry the bride, so by making him miss his own wedding, I could swoop in and pull the "if you ever need someone to talk to" card to try to win her over. Everyone immediately believed his sob story, so they all turned their backs on me and villainized me. I didn't even have the friends to back me up, because they were all so intoxicated. I'm surprised they remember we went out. It didn't hurt that my brother had used factual details in his story and just swapped it to make me seem like the bad guy. One of them even said they remembered someone saying "old ball and chain," which confirmed my brother's story. They asked me why I didn't bring that up, and I said it was because I didn't want the bride to feel even worse than she already did by bringing up that her fiancé called her that. Nobody believed me and said I was a liar since I left out all sorts of details in my side of the story. My brother kicked me out of his wedding, and even a week later, I'm still getting messages from my parents telling me I embarrassed them. My brother did get married, but because he's on his honeymoon, I haven't contacted him, but trust me, when he gets back, I'll be the one sucker punching him.
Story 45. My roommate stinks and refuses to shower. I've thrown up twice already. I am completely sympathetic to the fact that having a shower may be a sensory issue for some people, and Chloe claims she has this issue. With this being said, she knew she was going away for a week. We had 6 months' notice, on a marine biology field course, sharing a room with 2 other people. We were all friends before this trip. When Chloe is at home, she has a bath once every 10 days and is bathed by her boyfriend. We received absolutely no warning of this, nor did we receive a warning that she would not be planning to shower or brush her teeth for the duration of the trip. Marine biology is quite labor-intensive, and of course involves standing on the beach and literally in the ocean. This trip also included miles-long walks every day to get to these beaches. Had Chloe had a strip baby wipe wash every evening, then the smell wouldn't have gotten to this point. But my god, you guys, the smell. It was straight up onions, vinegar, and body odor. I threw up twice because of it. Actually, the worst smell from something living I've ever smelt. At this point, 4 days of walking and climbing rock pools, we could no longer deal with the smell at all. Even our other friends that would walk past the room would gag. I really am not being dramatic. Instead of using antiperspirant deodorant, she was using a perfume under her arms and on her feet, making the smell a million times worse. To top all of this off, there was an outbreak of bacterial meningitis in our class whilst we were away. It was only at this point that we asked her to shower. We only asked her to shower to reduce the risk of infection, and we did also mention the smell at this point. We all weren't sure about the ins and outs of this illness and how it is spread, but we wanted to be as clean as possible after seeing our classmates and being within close confines of them all day. We were treating it like a virus. We did ask nicely. We said the room smelt, and that if we all have a shower, we didn't know it was a sensory issue at this point, then it would improve the smell and the situation for us all. My friend showered, I showered, then Chloe left the room to go see some of her friends. We were absolutely baffled. The next day, we asked less nicely. It was ripe. She walks out of the room and returns 5 minutes later with one of our uni lecturers. She had spoken to the uni lecturer and accused us of bullying her. She has also made an anonymous submission to our university's drama Facebook page, which says the following: "If you want to go on this trip, don't. I was bullied so much I cried every night and the staff did nothing. I know the 2 girls who did it will see this post, and here is my message to you both. My family and I aren't happy, and we will be taking this matter to the police for bullying, and to the university for non-academic misconduct. We are at university now. You You would think people would have matured, but apparently not. Bullying is serious. Now this came as a complete shock. She had not been crying every night, or at least not that we noticed, nor did we give her a reason to cry every night. The only thing we can possibly think of, and we've checked with our other friends, was the mention of the smell and the fact she needs to shower. It hurts us that this has upset her so much, but our point is, if you know you are going away for a week, and you do not plan on showering or know you have difficulty doing this, wouldn't you warn your roommates? Plan to have a baby wipe wash, which she admitted she is fine to do. If we had known about the awful personal hygiene this 21-year-old girl has, then there is no way we would have agreed to share a room with her. So, Aida? Story 46. My male spilt hot coffee on me for not wanting to name my baby after her dead husband. I am pregnant with my fiance's first child. We've chosen to keep the gender a secret and just buy clothes we think are cute. It's been so much fun, but 3 days ago, it kinda changed. I was with my MIL and she was asking us about baby names. She suggested a few: Theodore, Jackson, Lars, and her persistent favorite, Jerson. I was confused when I heard it, but apparently it was her late husband's name. He died when my fiance was 5 of an overdose, so she suggested we call him that. I responded, what if it's a girl? And no offense, but that name is really uncommon and very special. It kind of came out wrong, but she started getting snarky with me saying, it's a boy, I can tell. She then rubbed my stomach, without consent, also with her knowing I'm sensitive to touch due to autism. I brushed her hand away and suggested, how about Sion? She showed the most disgusted face and said, no, we need an American name, not Irish. You're not Irish anymore, you're American. I looked at her dumbfounded. I was literally born and raised in Cork before moving at 19. She knows this, but I tried to suggest another to move on. How about Asha? She looked at me disgustedly. My baby is a boy, a boy. She yelled louder. I tried to calm her down. Okay, how about Leo? That apparently was her breaking point. That's when it happened. She took the cup of coffee she had and threw it at me. It was hot. Hot, I tell you. I quickly got up and left immediately. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I just stopped by a McDonald's to clean myself up. I drove home after that and told my husband. He was shocked and immediately went to tell his mother off. And of course, this is where the crocodile tears come. She threatened me. She said I'd never be able to meet my grandbaby if I didn't butt out and let her pick the name after I suggested your father's name. She cried. My husband is unsure of who to believe. He said that even if I was telling the truth, I shouldn't have riled her up, that her husband was the love of her life, and it would mean so much to her if we named our baby after him. He's sleeping on the couch from now on. Am I being too harsh? Story 47. My entitled mother wore a wedding dress at my brother's wedding and tried to marry him. My mom and I have always had a difficult relationship. I'm her scapegoat and my brother is her golden child. He can really do no wrong in her eyes. I'm expected to do housework every time I visit while my brother sits around doing nothing. My mom expects me to cater to his every need if we both visit at the same time. Last Christmas, we were all going to my mom's house and she swore up and down that she did not need any help from anybody. Well, my mom actually gave me the wrong arrival time because she wanted me to get there earlier and help her out. Normally I wouldn't mind, especially because I did offer to help before, but I was the only one there. I felt like a caterer instead of a guest. I set up the entire house ready for Christmas, and then she had me serve everybody at the table while she sat down and complained about how exhausted she was from all the work she did. Mind you, I basically did everything around the house. Then, she wanted me to wash everybody's dishes and told all of her guests to not help me because I could handle it, and they're just dishes. She bragged about how if she could make this entire house spotless all on her own, I could get my pretty hands dirty for one day. And it didn't even stop there for the night. All the men started watching some football game, and my mom made me give my brother anything he asked for. He even went as far as asking for a massage, though he swears he was just messing around because he noticed how my mom was making me do everything, but my mom would not let me say no and insisted I give him the massage regardless of what either of us said. It was such a humiliating experience for both of us. After that, I just stopped visiting and I've been avoiding her. I only talk to her out of necessity, which still isn't a lot. Despite all of this, my brother and I are still very close and I'm good friends with my sister-in-law. My mom, however, has treated my sister-in-law terribly ever since she started dating my brother 5 years ago. During the Christmas party, I even heard my mom badmouth my sister-in-law, and the only reason she doesn't like her is because she thinks she stole her golden child away from her. It didn't help that my brother announced that when they get married, they're going to move to a different state, far, far away from our mom. It was actually my brother's idea since he always told me he wanted to leave this state because we've lived here our whole lives. But my mom has placed all the blame on my sister-in-law and accused her of trying to break their bond by making them move. Things only got worse when my brother and sister-in-law had their wedding in October of this year. My mom showed up in a floor-length white wedding dress. She had this grin the entire time and it was so obvious she was proud and happy of herself when she saw my sister-in-law on the verge of tears. At that point, I had enough of my mom berating my sister-in-law all the time because of her weird feelings for my brother. My sister-in-law is the sweetest person I know, and I could not have my horrible mother ruin her wedding. So without thinking, I just grabbed a bottle of red wine and dumped the whole thing down my mom's front. She flipped out and screamed at me that I had ruined her special day. Hold up, what? I asked her what she meant by that, but she wouldn't answer me. She just kept shouting that I was awful, and she always hated me. She said this is why she preferred my brother to me, because I was crazy. These were all things I knew, so I didn't let it affect me. However, she had exposed her true colors in front of all the guests. My mom had been called out on her favoritism countless times, but she always said she loved me and my brother the same. but she had just told the families the truth, and I was so happy. As for my brother, he kicked my mom out of the wedding and said it was going to take him a lot of time to trust her again. My mom went home crying, and she actually didn't attempt to come back. After the wedding, my brother talked to me in private and apologized for never standing up for me. He said he liked being the favorite and all the extra attention he got, but our mom went too far today. He said he hadn't realized he was enabling her behavior, but his wife had talked to him about the favoritism and how it needed to stop. He even confessed that he was rethinking inviting my mom, but his wife said he should give her one last chance to be a mature adult. Trying to upstage his wife was the last straw, so he's going to cut contact with her for now. Story 48. My husband told me he's sick of babysitting our newborn. Please help plus update. I feel like I'm going crazy, and I've been cooped up at home with a screaming baby for so long it's perfectly possible that I've lost my mind. I am 25 years old. I met my husband when I was 20, and he was 30. Even though we had a pretty significant age gap, our relationship always seemed to work. I like that he was older, and could guide me through life in a way someone my own age couldn't. He was very smart and charming, and I fell in love with him fast. We worked in an office together. He was one of the supervisors, and I was just a summer intern, but we ended up falling for each other despite our differences. Nope. My husband proposed after we had been dating for about 8 months, and I said yes since I thought he was the most perfect man a woman could ask for. I had always known him to be this level-headed, mature guy, so his behavior ever since I gave birth to our first child had been shocking and disappointing to me. Our baby has recently been having trouble sleeping, and I have been the only one getting up literally every single time the baby wakes up. I sat my husband down and told him very honestly how tired I was, and that I needed support from him, especially while our baby was going through this restless period. He said that I should have expected this from a newborn, but he would try to help more either way. This only lasted about a week. He did start waking up to comfort the baby, but he just sort of stopped doing it after a week. I would always try to wake him up and ask him to go check on her, but he just grumbled and put a pillow over his head to better ignore me. He was starting to make me feel so alone, and I ended up asking advice from both my own mom and my mother-in-law. Both of them were very supportive, and both seemed upset when I told them about my husband's neglect. My mother-in-law actually called my husband the next day and chewed him out, telling him he needed to step up and take care of his child. It was her words towards him that really snapped him into action, and my husband started waking up every night for the baby and just generally watching her more often and actually giving me breaks to relax from childcare. My husband worked and told me to quit my job when I got pregnant, so I was home with the screaming baby 24/7, and I really appreciated that he had started to take her off my hands so I could have some time for myself again, even if it was just an hour or two here or there. Well, I guess it was all a pipe dream, because after only about 3 weeks of my husband actually watching the baby, he freaked out one night when the baby started crying and screamed at the top of his lungs that he was tired of this shit. His booming yell only made the baby start crying more, and he followed me into the baby's nursery while I tried to comfort her, still yelling. He called me lazy and said he was sick and tired of babysitting our little brat, and that this was a wife's duty, not his, and he had no place watching the baby this much. He said that I knew what I was signing up for when I got pregnant, and I was unreasonable to expect this much help from him. I didn't even try and argue with him. I just cried and fed my baby while trying to tune him out as he yelled and yelled at us in the middle of the night. I slept in the baby's room that night. It was the first time I ever felt scared of my husband. I resent him more every day, and I'm starting to think I made a huge mistake having children with this man. Well, it only took a little while longer for my fears to be concerned, but there's no going back now. Update. In my first post, I spoke about how my husband had been neglecting our baby in the middle of the night and leaving me with 100% of the childcare. I had contacted his mom about how he had been treating the baby, and she pressured him into actually watching our child more often and comforting her in the middle of the night to give me a break. He had only done it for a couple of weeks before he had a screaming breakdown at me in the middle of the night where he said he was done babysitting our daughter. Since then, I felt like I have been walking on eggshells around my husband. I try not to complain about anything, and I am the only one who takes care of our baby at all now. He doesn't ask to hold her. He doesn't change her, and it's been weeks since the last time he got up to comfort her in the middle of the night. Even though I stopped asking him for help, my husband has still continued to show signs of aggression towards me and the baby. A little while after he blew up at me, he started having dramatic, aggressive reactions in the middle of the night when our daughter would cry. He would curse really loud, punch the bed, and once he even threw his phone at the wall we shared with the nursery, I guess to try and make the baby stop crying. It was awful to see, and the way he is escalating only continued to scare me. Looking back, I feel like the worst mom in the world for not removing my baby and me from that environment earlier. It was only getting more dangerous for us, and I should have protected my little girl when I still could. I want to break down and cry when I think back to this night. I can barely think about it without shaking and freaking out. It was the middle of the night, and my daughter woke up crying as usual. She woke up maybe twice or 3 times a night, and I know it was frustrating, but I never thought my husband was capable of crossing a line like this. I heard my daughter's cry, and I started to rise from bed when I heard my husband wake up and scream profanity. It was terrifying and so jarring, and before I could do anything, he was storming out of our room and into the nursery. I followed as quickly as possible and started begging him to calm down. That's when, to my horror, my husband walked over to my poor baby's crib, picked her up, and shook her like a rag doll. I had never seen him act so unhinged and violent, and I was a mess as I begged him to put her down. He was screaming in her little face to shut up as he shook her, and the image is burned into my mind forever. It was the darkest, cruelest thing I had ever seen another person do. And before he could put her down, I knew I wanted nothing more to do with this man. He was a monster, and after that, I would never see him as the man I loved again. My husband eventually put my screaming baby down and went back to bed as if nothing happened. I took my baby straight to the hospital to get her checked out, and by some miracle, she was okay. And I went to my mom's from the hospital and told her what happened. I also called my mother-in-law and told her what happened as well. She sobbed on the phone and apologized over and over again for her son's actions. I contacted a divorce lawyer the very same week, and I decided I never wanted to see my husband again. Because I had a record of the hospital visit, I was granted a temporary restraint order from my husband while our divorce was being finalized. It was the scariest, loneliest period of my life, but I know I did the right thing by leaving my husband and making sure my baby was never around anyone who would hurt her and jeopardize her life like that. I just thank God everything for letting her go unharmed the day my ex shook her like that, and I just wish I could erase that disturbing image from my mind forever.
Story 49. My dad tried to force me to cut my hair, so my aunt decided to get revenge. I have never been so frustrated with one of my parents before, and I don't understand why the hell my dad is freaking out over nothing. I just recently turned 18, and I have 2 other older siblings. I am very close with my mom, but not as close with my dad. My dad is super conservative, and I don't agree with a lot of the bull that comes out of his mouth, but he's never pissed me off as bad as he has now. Anyway, with my 2 older siblings, my parents made a deal with them that if they saved half the money for their first cars, then my parents would match their savings and buy them a car. Both my siblings successfully got their first cars that way, and I had always looked forward to getting my first car when I turned 18. Anyway, my family had taken me out to eat for my birthday, and we were having a great time just talking and laughing until I brought up the topic of the car. I had saved almost $3,000 in the past 2 years from my part-time job, and I was pumped. My mom matched my excitement and said she was proud of me for working so hard, but my dad got weirdly silent, and when I turned to him and asked when we would go pick out my car, he said we needed to talk. For context, I have been growing out my hair for the past 2 years. It's very thick and goes past my shoulders. Girls at my school really like it, and I always get compliments. I take care of my long hair as well, and I always make sure it's washed and smells nice. My dad has said plenty of weird things about masculinity before, but until that day, I had zero idea he had any issues with my hair. My dad cleared his throat and said that I wasn't seeing a dime of my car money until I got rid of my girl hair. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but it turns out he was dead serious. I told him I loved my hair, and it took forever to grow, and it looked great on me. I told him we had a deal, and I had worked hard towards this goal, and he couldn't just back out over something like this. It seemed like it was the first my mom was hearing about it too, because she backed me up and told my dad my acting was controlling and ridiculous. My dad said the only thing that needed controlling was my feminine side, and if I was old enough to drive, I was old enough to look like a real man. He totally killed the mood of dinner. I just got sad and so shut down, and we all left. When we got home, I just went to my room and tried my best to hold in my tears. I had been so excited for my car, and he had just ripped it away like it was nothing. I considered cutting my hair, but I really didn't want to give to my terrible father what he wanted. A couple of days went by, and the mood in our house was cold towards my father. Both my siblings and my mom were mad at him on my behalf, but he wasn't budging. He said we were all being dramatic, and that someone in the family needed to teach me not to be a sissy. My mom also had a talk with me, where she apologized for my dad's behavior, and said she would try her best to pay for half of the car. I told her I didn't want her to pay it all, and that I was hurt, but I didn't want to act entitled. Well, I guess the news of my dad's behavior had started to spread to extended family members, and a few days after my birthday dinner, my favorite aunt called me, and I had no idea how much that call would change my life. Update. The aunt who called me was actually my dad's little sister, but she was nothing like him. She had always been my favorite aunt since she had always been sweet to me growing up. She had a really funny personality and a great career. My aunt never had kids, and instead spoils me and my siblings with expensive gifts and trips. It didn't surprise me to hear from her after the news started to spread. As soon as I answered the phone, I could tell she was pissed off. I told my aunt everything that happened over the phone, and she went off telling me how sick she was of my father. She said that he was an idiot and bigot, and he wasn't the only one with some pocket change. She called my father some names and made some jokes to cheer me up, and she ended the call saying she was going to make this all right. The call made me feel a lot better. Just to hear my aunt say that my dad was in the wrong and I deserved the car made me feel better. I didn't want to act like some spoiled brat, and I was just hurt and confused that my dad would choose to die on this hill. Well, the very next day after my aunt called me, my entire family was home, and it was around 6 p.m. I was in the living room with my mom and my siblings, and my dad was in his office. That's when we heard a random car pull into the driveway and beep its horn over and over. We all went outside, and to my shock, there was a brand new version of my dream car. My aunt hopped out of the driver's seat with a huge smile on her face, ran up to me, and gave me a big hug before yelling surprise. It only took me a second to understand what was going on, and when she hugged me again, this time she said, "You deserve this, buddy. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve the things you worked hard for." I started crying as she pulled out of our hug. My aunt had always treated me well, but this was next level. It felt like a dream. My mom and my siblings were hugging me and congratulating me when my dad finally came out of the house to see what the commotion was. He looked livid when he noticed what was going on, and he yelled at my aunt first. He even tried to walk up to me and snatch the keys out of my hand. That's when my aunt physically got in between us and gave my dad a hard shove backward. She started screaming at my dad. She called him a failure of a parent and said if he wasn't gonna love his son, there were plenty of other people in the family who would. She said he should be ashamed of himself, and my siblings and I had to stifle our laughter when she said he was just jealous of my hair because he was a balding coward. My dad argued back at my aunt and even tried to tell her that he would get the car taken away from me since he's still my legal guardian. My aunt said I was a legal adult adult, and the car was in my name and no one else's, and if he laid a finger on it, she would call the cops on him for theft. I guess my dad realized he wasn't winning in this situation. He turned to my mom and said, "Are you really gonna let this happen?" And my mom just said, "Yep," without missing a beat. I wish my dad hadn't acted like such a jerk in the first place, but my aunt backing me up like that is certainly a core memory now. More than anything, my aunt's taught me about what kind of adult I want to grow up to be, and I just feel so loved and supported that my dad's bullcrap means nothing to me now.
Story 50. My 34-year-old husband is obsessed with our boss's 20-year-old daughter. My husband and I work at a small firm. During the work time, our boss would occasionally bring his then teenage daughter to work. She should have been around 15 when we first met her, and had her interact with the employees and stuff to show her what we were doing, how things work, etc. Fast forward to January of this year, the boss brought her in, officially, letting us know that she will be taking over a good deal of his work overlooking things. We were initially hesitant, considering she was so young, turned 20 this year, but ultimately, she wasn't taking over, more so learning to handle the business while the boss managed other work. It helped that she herself was also very keen on cooperating and taking advice, often holding meetings to discuss things and making sure she herself is the last to leave work almost every time. It's been an overall good development in that regard. The issue started initially a few months after she started. She would occasionally hold office events, just to lighten the mood, and this earned her a lot of praise, from all of us, since it's not something the old boss would have time to look into. We were all talking about her, so it didn't feel too weird at first when my husband joined in on the praising, how impressive it is she's so young but so mature, how she's been a breath of fresh air in the office, everyone's so motivated to work cause of her, etc. With hindsight, it seems like that was just his in on talking about her with me in general. Every now and then he'd start singing her praises when we're at home, a huge talking point always being how she's so mature for her age and understanding, even pointing out how we weren't at that age. I didn't take it much to heart, until one time I joked that it was fine if he was immature at times, and that I would love him regardless. And his response was something along the lines of, "Well, you were too, unlike her." I think that was the first time I felt a bit bad, because it felt like he actually was just comparing me to her now. But I tried not to think too much about it. This slowly spiraled too, going from talking about her maturity to looks, how she can still look good while being so busy with studies and work, how she, and I quote, was definitely more gifted compared to other girls. Once, out of insecurity, I asked if he thought she was prettier than me. He gave me an, "Of course you're attractive to me, but objectively, like, not considering my attraction to you, she is prettier." This messed with me for a while, and we ended up having a fight, where I essentially banned him from bringing her up with me, if it's not work-related. Also adding to it was the fact that he started taking extra work every now and then, and working overtime, and while I initially thought it was to just earn extra money, I later found out it was simply because he knew she usually heads home late too, usually after most, if not all, office employees left. Fast forward to a few days back, the weekend happened. My husband was out with his friends, and my laptop was being repaired, so I used his laptop without his permission. I had put some videos on autopay as background noise as I did some work. When I opened his PC folder and on the left quick access bar, there was a folder with our boss's daughter's name. I had to click it, and when I did, I actively couldn't believe what I was seeing. A folder of over 1K plus pictures of her, screenshots from Instagram and other apps, any and every picture he could find of her, and an insane number of pictures just taken without her consent, with either a hidden camera or his phone at the office. It all ranged from her just sitting or working, to some from a high enough angle to get cleavage or down blouse, and even a few under the table shots. This creeped me out, beyond anything, since it was almost impossible to place my husband, who I have always known as the sweetest guy, for the 6 years we have been married, as someone who would do something like this. I was shocked and just didn't really know how to react. If I should feel disgusted or sad, angry, I don't know. But then it got worse. I used a search to look up her name on his laptop and found something that basically turned any form of sorrow or sadness I would have felt into just pure disgust. He basically had a folder poorly hidden deep in a number of folders, just full of photoshopped pictures of her, some solo, some with him, some with other members of the office, and some just absolutely vile and disgusting. I was furious, but I also didn't want him to know yet, so I acted normal that night. And then the next day, I called up my cousin, asked if she needed help with her pregnancy, and used that as an excuse to move in and help her for a bit. I have talked to my husband, though limited, mostly through texts and occasionally at work, but for the last 4 days, I have been living with my cousin. Honestly, I am disgusted, but I also don't know what to do exactly. I feel a mixture of being cheated on, which I know he didn't do anything with her, but still, I can't explain it. But on top of that, I feel disgusted that my husband was this sort of a man. What should I do? Story 51, Eta for secretly planning on moving out. Despite my still expecting to have her wedding at my place, I worked really hard at building my relationship with Ryan. I accommodated him into my schedule, did things to help him feel loved and appreciated, and did my best to be a doting girlfriend. I'm ashamed to admit it, but after all I've done, I can't stand him. I don't even hate him. I'm just repulsed. I discovered that he's extremely immature and not in a fun-loving way. Whenever I point this out, he says he's like Peter Pan. This used to cause emotional distress, but I've passed that. He's a very controlling person who still thinks being mommy's little boy is some kind of an achievement. He talks about his childhood very vividly and acts like he's still able to get away with anything. Ryan describes his intimate encounters encounters with his exes in detail, despite making me feel horrible. I don't feel appreciated. He shushes me whenever I bring up my heritage because it's only keeping me tied to the past. He criticized my love for my childhood home and got very triggered because I mentioned some dear high school friends who happen to be guys. I've built a good career while he games all the time. I'm fed up. In 3 years, I worked hard to complete my MBA, consolidate my small business, and now I have some major companies as clients. In the meantime, Ryan keeps relying on favors to get a job, and he keeps getting fired. I've asked him to control his instinct to get freebies. He's content with getting free stuff instead of actually buying something that he likes. Last summer, he dragged me to a kiosk at the farmer's market because the guy offered him a free sandwich. What's eating me up is that he can't give me a straight answer after I've become suspicious that he lied about his degree. This is very serious, because it means that he lied about his prospects, and he allowed me to include him in my life, and somehow he's tried to force me to be responsible for him. I was made to believe he had found a job only to find out that he was attending board games tournaments at a local indie gaming shop. My feelings for him have changed since last New Year's Eve, when he stood me up to go see his family, and I wasn't allowed to join. We had already made plans for a quiet and romantic evening, and I brought the food and the wine, and he waited until 2 p.m. to let me know that I would be spending it alone. He said MIL needed him because New Year's Eve gives her flashbacks from Phil. Phil left her in the 90s and married his mistress in the 2000s. I felt horrible. He knew New Year's Eve is important to me. He knows that I was looking forward to a romantic evening and that my family lives on the other side of the country. He knows being here is a sacrifice for me because I have kids that I bend over backwards to spend time with, and that flying every Wednesday to see them is a huge part of being present. I took a client whose deadline was January 2nd, and I agreed because I needed the money. That was a game changer for me, but my heart was broken. After that, I've tried to work around not losing my love for him, but what I feel is that I'm experiencing the pain of losing respect for this man. I can't stand it. I can't even look at him, and I feel very guilty because I'm finding my happiness behind his back. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I constantly make up supposed work schedules just to get away from him. His sister asked me to allow her to have her wedding at my place because she can't afford anything else, and now she's not speaking to me, but she still expects me to host her. I agreed on having the wedding where I live because I thought we could actually get to know each other, and it would help to create a good relationship, which is important to me. I don't know if she's not speaking to me because she feels she doesn't need me anymore, or because there's something I don't know that's happening. I'm mentioning this because SEL and Mael have a history of playing victim, and SIL finds ways to get aggravated constantly. I tried to talk to her, and she has simply ignored my calls and my messages. I thought that because of this, she had decided to have her wedding elsewhere, but now I'm being informed that I need to remove my pets on my furniture so that she can use my living room for her ceremony. I texted and called to get clarification and was left on scene, and honestly, I got pissed. It feels like I'm begging to be a part of their family. I'm so angry, and I told him, and basically he kind of shrugged. I've decided to just move out without telling him. I talked to my landlord so that I can leave 2 months earlier. I'll just take my pets and everything I own while he's at work and just drive off. I'm feeling tired of feeling lonely within this relationship. Last month, I was inducted into a career guild and refused to take him as my +1 because I didn't want any pictures of him next to me. It would ruin the moment. I don't owe him anything. He left me basically alone when I had an illness and was very irritated whenever I asked if he could buy me some food. I owe him nothing of what I am, as he has never celebrated me while I bent over backwards to help his mom despite her attitude. I spent my birthday alone because he was busy. All he does is ask me how much more money I'm going to get in the future. I know this is my fault, because at some point I promised him that I would help him fund his dream restaurant, but that was back when things were great between us. I know it's wrong to go back on my word, but I can help it. I don't want to be in his future, and I don't want to invest in his life. I'm still down for what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm being an a-hole for planning on leaving him without telling him. I just don't want his family to yell at me like they did to my other SEL when she left my brother-in-law. Also, SEL can be very volatile, and both she and Mail claimed they have assaulted people, but I don't know if they are just bragging. He has been asking what's going on because I can barely hide my contempt whenever he tries to initiate a conversation about helping him create a business. I'm fed up with having to listen to his insistent questions that are making me feel very uncomfortable. I told him I'm not an insistent person. I didn't harass him to come to my place when he stood me up on New Year's Eve. I didn't insist that he give me a present for my birthday because he's an adult. He says it's different since a business is a lifelong situation, and a birthday gift loses value. I'm clear on the end of our relationship, but I'm kind of doubtful about ruining the wedding. It's 10 days away. Eta?
Story 1. Am I the jerk for not forgiving my fiancé for missing the birth of our daughter? My husband's girl best friend, we'll call her Madison, has never liked me, for reasons I guess I will never know. Anyways, my fiancé, we'll call him Michael, and I were having a hangout with a little bit of the friends that we shared. It was nearing the end of the night, and Madison was the only friend left when Madison came out crying with Michael looking angry. I was around 9 months pregnant at the time. The thing that really caught my attention is when Michael called me a raging B word and a C word. Myself, being a hormonal pregnant woman, started crying at the name calling. I asked through my tears what was going on, and he then proceeds to tell me about a text message I sent to Madison. In the message, I told her to F off, and about how Michael and I would not allow her near our child. I will admit that I did send this, but it was taken completely out of context. I only sent this text after the many racist text messages that she sent me talking about my child and I. I am biracial. Instead of hearing me out, Michael kicked me out of the house that we shared. His name was on the lease. Without arguing, I decided to leave, not wanting to start anything else. As I was walking out the door, I felt a cramp in my lower abdomen. I thought nothing nothing of this because I was not due for another 3 weeks. When I flinched from the pain, Michael told me to stop faking. On the way to my mom's house, I felt a gush of water and immediately turned the car around so that I would make it to the hospital. While driving, I took out my phone to call Michael, but my call was quickly declined. At this point, I was into much pain to call anyone else and arrived at the hospital. I pushed for 2 hours without an epidural and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Grace Knoll. Giving birth without my fiancé by my side was the final straw for me. I decided to do something and post all the hurtful messages Madison sent me on Facebook. Maybe 45 min 1 hour later, Michael calls me asking me if we could talk. I inform him about my whereabouts, and he shows up about 42 minutes later. He has tried to apologize multiple times, but I don't think I can forgive him. I went through the pain of pushing out an 8-pound baby by myself, all because he chose to believe his best friend without listening to his fiancé. Am I the jerk for not wanting to forgive him? Story 2. My unhygienic daughter is accusing me of abuse because I'm trying to get her to shower, so I've nicknamed her Stinky. About a month ago, my daughter decided to stop showering or taking care of her hygiene in any way, shape, or form. When she came to me about this on day 1, explaining that the need to shower is a social construct, she stated that she plans to not brush her teeth or shower to try to prove to everyone around her that you can maintain hygiene without doing these things. At first, I thought it was weird or a joke of some sorts. I tried ignoring it, but by the 3rd day, the fact she had not showered after going to the gym or even brushed her teeth, I let her know in the nicest way possible that she should probably shower and brush her teeth. I mean, she had honestly started smelling pretty bad, especially her breath. I had to stand away from her in order to avoid smelling it. When I told her this, she retorted saying that what I'm saying is extremely harmful and triggering to her, and that it's her body, her choice. We had a conversation about it, where I did my best to point out that basic hygiene is important, and I think I messed up when I told her that not showering is complete nonsense and idiocy. She exploded at me, saying that I am being insensitive to her issues. I asked her, "What effing issues? The fact you smell bad." She proceeded to storm upstairs and not to shower. Our next argument about it ensued a week later, when she got up in the morning and proceeded to wear the same clothes she had for the last 3 days, once again, having not showered or brushed her teeth. I don't think I can describe how bad the smell was. She is my daughter, and I love her, so I tried again to be as gentle as possible. I told her that she seriously needs to shower, and that what she is doing is seriously not okay. Once again, my body, my choice, was her response. I mean, I guess she's right in a weird sense. She has the right not to shower or brush her teeth as some sort of rebellion, even if it does affect our quality of life. We can't go out because she smells way too bad and would be made fun of in public, and even being around her is quite unbearable as she really does smell awful. So, I figured that if she has the right to do this, I have the right to retort and do something back, regardless of how it impacts her. I figured that I would call her Stinky. That would be my new name for her. I would no longer call her by her name, but rather Stinky, and so I started doing just that. The first time I called her Stinky, she exploded at me, calling me abusive and manipulative, that I'm a terrible father because I'm bullying my daughter, but I never stopped. She still continued to refuse to shower, however, no matter how much I called her, so I took it one step further. I changed her name in my phone to Stinky, urged her to call herself Stinky, and did everything I could to let her know that she needs to shower. She had a breakdown over it a few days ago. It had been almost 3 weeks that I had been strictly calling her Stinky. She came to me and begged me to stop. I first told her she needed to take a step back when talking to me because her breath smelled awful, and she seemed disheartened when I said that. Our conversation can be best described as unproductive, as once again, I got called abusive for trying to make her shower, and I called her Stinky when she stormed up into her room wearing the same set of clothes she has been wearing for the past 4 days. We have not spoken since. We stay clear of each other, and I'm really worried that our relationship will soon be irreparable if she doesn't start showering. Story 3. My 12-year-old daughter tells me that her mental health is deteriorating, but I don't believe her. I am currently with my fiancé, and we live on a farm. My oldest daughter, Luna, is 12, and she's from a previous relationship. She mostly stays with my ex-girlfriend in the city so she can be with friends and go to school. My youngest daughter is 2 and is from my current relationship. My eldest daughter has struggled with mental health for years, and I partly think it's because of her inability to take criticism. When my daughter was 8, I constantly called her overweight. Because she was, I told her she would be a loser in society if she does not lose it, and so on. My fiancé always tried to intervene, but it ended in a huge fight each time. I separated with my fiancé when Luna was 11, and she started living with her mom. From what Luna has told me, the things I said have impacted her deeply, and she has tried to off herself 3 separate times, but I tell her that my strategies worked as she lost weight, and she blows her mental health problems out of proportion. For the summer, Luna stays with me, and I make her do work, such as planting seeds, building things, pulling grass, etc. My current fiancé and her have been been getting along well, that is, until my fiancé got into a verbal fight with my daughter over wasting food she doesn't like. I have a few times caught my eldest daughter crying instead of working, but I don't pay any attention to it and tell her to keep working. Recently, my daughter has come in crying when she was supposed to be working and locked herself in the bathroom. I went to comfort her, and she told me, "My mind is telling me scary things." I told her it would be all right, and she can continue working through the night and have the next day off work. Recently it happened again, but I need her to get her work done, so I told her to push through it and keep working. Luna has been pretty dull and upset lately, and whenever I give her tasks, she seems on the verge of tears. She always seems to be in her own head and wanting to be left alone. I'm sure she's fine, but I can't help but think that it may be my doing. Story 4. My ridiculous wife screamed at my mom, so I told her to calm down. I know telling anyone to calm down does the opposite. It simply came out because she was being ridiculous. My wife isn't a fan of my family. None of them have done anything to her personally, but she states it's because all of them give her backhanded comments or unsolicited advice. I've never noticed it and refuse to take her word for it because my family is super kind. She's told me she's tired of dealing with all the negative comments from my family. That's understandable, but it takes zero effort to be civil for my sake. She says she shouldn't have to be civil to people who don't respect her or take her seriously, and she hates that I never take her side on these things, but I swear they're never happening. I don't want to say she's being crazy, but if the shoe fits, wear it. Anyway, my wife gave birth a month ago to our daughter. On Sunday, I invited my mom and a few other family members down to meet the baby. My wife heavily protested against this because her family hasn't met the baby yet. I told her I didn't see why it mattered which family saw the baby first, as long as they all loved her. She gave in at some point and said, whatever. She clearly wasn't up for it, but it is what it is. I still wanted my mom to meet her granddaughter regardless of what my wife said. Before the occasion, my wife pumped because she knew people would ask to feed the baby. Problem is, my daughter has never used a bottle, as she's strictly breastfed. My wife was pissed from the moment my family walked in through the door. She said her pleasantries, but didn't even talk to them, or was rude in answering any questions they had. What got her in a worse mood was how much the baby was being passed around. She was so red, I just told her to take a shower or something to cool off. She refused, because she needed to be there to watch and make sure nothing happened. I hated that she didn't trust my family at all with our daughter, as if they came here with the intent to harm her. They were all just showing love to her and being super kind. But no, my wife was not having it. When the baby started crying, and she wasn't passed back to my wife, despite my wife saying she wanted her back, I knew this was it. Luckily, she didn't cause a scene. Well, that was until the baby started getting fed. My mom had the baby and was feeding her the pumped breast milk. That's when the baby started choking on the bottle. My mom is slow, so she recognized the issue, but didn't sit her up as quickly as my wife liked. So, my wife immediately stepped in and took the baby to sit her up right. My mom said, I have kids, you know. I know what I'm doing. I'm not stupid. And my wife snapped and aggressively asked, really? That's why you just kept her on her back while she's choking and puking? She eventually handed the baby back off to my mom, but then the baby choked again, and my wife just lost it. Because again, my mom didn't sit the baby up with urgency like my wife wanted. My mom tried protesting and saying she was being ridiculous, so my wife told her to shut up and get out. I told her she needs to go calm the hell down, and she can't talk to my mom like that, or kick her out of my house. Now I'm getting the silent treatment, because I defended my mother and clearly want the baby to aspirate on her own vomit, as well as calling us all idiots.
Story 5. My awful niece smashed my daughter's face into her cake on her birthday. My daughter's 5th birthday was 2 days ago, and it was the most hectic birthday party ever. My daughter basically planned the entire birthday since she invited her friends and picked out all the decorations. The party was just going to be family and friends in the backyard of our house. Everyone arrived relatively on time, except for my sister. She came hours late with her children. I don't want to sound like a mean aunt, but her children are bad, disrespectful, selfish, and lack any manners. My sister essentially messed around and found out. There was a period of time where she went broke. My parents refused to help her because she had lied to them about going to college when she actually dropped out and used the money they would send her to buy substances. She never bothered to contact me for help because we were never on the best of terms since she always argued with me whenever she saw me, so she didn't have my number back then. In order to get back on her feet, she hooked up with guys for money. Things went wrong and she got pregnant 2 separate times by 2 guys who didn't want anything to do with her. Because her whole hookup thing was very anonymous, she had no way to find them, so she couldn't even get child support from these guys. She was left alone to raise these kids, but she resents them and it shows, which is why she doesn't care about how they act. She couldn't care less about them being rude to people or not having any proper manners. If anything, they remind her of a period in time where she was at her lowest. She's also grown to hate me even more than she already did because I went to college, have a good job that pays well, and have a happy family. Ever since my daughter was born, my sister would have to hear about her from other family members or see her at family events. I can tell she doesn't like my daughter, and I didn't want to invite her to the party because of it. But my daughter is too young to understand that her aunt doesn't like her and sees the world through rose-tinted glasses where the word hate doesn't even exist. The party was going well and my daughter was having a lot of fun. She especially loved the red carpet surprise we did when she entered the backyard in her dress and heels. I heard my niece ask her mom why she never had that for her birthday, and it actually made me sad. I don't think it's fair how my sister treats her kids, but if I ever tried to lecture her about her kids, she would throw a huge tantrum and call me names. But now that I think about it, I don't think my niece has ever had birthday parties, which would explain why she did what she did. When it was time to cut the cake, my daughter sat in her high princess chair, with both of my nieces sitting on chairs on her left and right side. We turned the lights off, lit the candles, and we all started to record as we sang happy birthday. I knew this was a party my daughter would never forget, but not for the right reasons. Just as my daughter was about to blow out her candles, one of my nieces blew it out, and the other one smashed my daughter's face into the cake. Not only was that incredibly dangerous, but so humiliating, and it ruined my daughter's birthday. My husband and I rushed to my daughter, and I unintentionally pushed the one that smashed her face into the cake onto the floor. She started crying, but I didn't care. The worst part is that some family members were still recording. I yelled at them to stop, but my sister started yelling at me for being immature, pushing her daughter, and said that my daughter was being dramatic. She said her daughters were just joking around, so my daughter was just crying for attention. I told her that her daughters were out of control, and they had no right to do this because it was my daughter's birthday, not theirs. Any pity I had for my nieces quickly left my body as I wiped the cake off of my daughter's face. My husband did damage control by getting people to stop recording and trying to kick my sister and her daughters out without causing a bigger scene. But that didn't work since my sister went as far as calling my daughter the N-word because she's half black from her dad's side. Her daughter started joining her and calling her that, and that's when my husband had enough. He threatened to call the cops if they didn't leave, but I never expected what happened next.
Story 6. What's something you'll never do again in your life? Salvia. It is the most messed up psychoactive substance in the world. My trip location was my girlfriend's place, a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I was having my 15-year-old brother trip sit me to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. This was single-handedly the most frightening experience I have ever had. I am a noob to psychoactive stuff. The only thing I had done before this was mushrooms, and that experience was amazing. Now this was 40 times as strong. My brother and I drove to my girlfriend's place around 10 p.m., and we quickly got everything ready. But before I tripped, I felt like getting cookied on some Mary Jane. After getting baked, I opened the container of purple sticky salvia and grabbed a big chunk between my fingers. I put it in the bowl, hands nervously shaking, all the while spilling the substance all over the countertop. When I finally had a full bowl of the dark, dry, grayish-green leaves, I got ready to take the hit. I had told my brother to keep me on the couch at all times, as I didn't want to cause any damage to the place while in salvia land. That was a bad idea. I sat down on the couch, hands still trembling, and grabbed it. I lit up the salvia, sat back, and held it for as long as I could. It couldn't have been more than 15 seconds later that I started to feel something. Start of trip. Everything in my peripheral vision started rapidly vibrating, and it eventually covered my entire field of view. I don't even remember exhaling, but managed to yell the words, oh dude, out twice, before completely blacking out for a few seconds. My vision was instantly brought from first person to third person, as if it were scrolling out in a video game. I saw myself on the couch from behind, when all of a sudden my body just completely snapped into this taco-shaped object at the speed of sound, while hearing a violent crack. After I witness this, my vision seems to be scrolling out more. It scrolls out until I can finally see darkness surrounding this square image of what was left of my current reality. I start hearing everything that ever existed all at once, flooding and overloading my brain. I heard every sound frequency imaginable. If I could describe it, it would be like a buzzsaw starting up and reaching its peak, magnified by 1,000,000, multiplied by 1,000,000. The one image of my reality multiplies at indescribable speeds, going and going and going. It finally reached the point where the division of my reality had reached the edge of the universe, and I felt every single thing that ever existed at once. Every time I swallowed, breathed, moved, every other reality did the same, however lagging behind me. It felt as though when I swallowed, every other reality would swallow, and I was feeling that for what felt like literal forever. Imagine a life where all you could do is swallow, non-stop, every day for the rest of your life. That is how it felt to do anything on that couch at that moment. It seemed, however, that the swallowing and whatnot was starting to get to some ending point, and that my realities had stopped multiplying. I felt so relieved for the slightest moment, when everything disintegrated from top to bottom. That is when I lost everything I knew. As it reached the bottom, I realized there was a picture behind that disintegration. I caught a slight glimpse of what I was about to be in for. It was me, shaped as some kind of rectangle-like object, laying completely flat, face up, and with my arms at my side. It looked as though my body was stuffed and filled to the brim in a see-through coffin. Not only this, but there were about 20 completely blue men holding this coffin, but holding it without using anything at all. It was just hovering above them. Still, these men had very creepy, stern looks on their faces, as if they were intent on doing their job. In the background of this image was unimaginable, indescribable colors, flowing and melding together, sort of pixelated in the way it was done. I witnessed all of this for about 3 seconds before I was literally pulled into the hardest, most forceful, turning and winding feeling at an amazing speed. It was these blue men, pulling me along with them wherever they went. They followed some kinds of roads that went on for eternities and eternities. It was pure and utter hell. I was witnessing all of this. However, I was being zoomed in and out of third person, all the while being flipped and twisted and turned every which way there ever is and will be. I heard awful sounds and screams. After eternities had passed, it seemed as though I had reached a destination. Everything stopped, and I went to third person. My coffin flipped up, vertically, and slammed extremely forceful and hard into a concrete wall. No, wait, I knew what this was. I could literally feel it. This was not a wall, this was a sidewalk. A sidewalk in front of my old house I used to live in, completely out of state. I had become the sidewalk. I could feel every last particle of my being spread across this sidewalk, and it eventually spread onto my old house. I spent decades living in my old house. Everything that it felt, I felt. During this time, I didn't feel so horrible. It was like I had finally felt a little bit of peace and quiet, but this peace and quiet was ripped away from me when the little blue men came back, somehow grabbed every single particle of me and vacuumed it back into the see-through coffin. I spent more and more time being forcefully dragged and thrown around by these little blue men into various objects. There came a point where these blue men were taking me somewhere, but it was a very familiar place I was headed. I could feel it. They stopped, flipped my coffin up, but wait, what I was being slammed into was not any object at all. It was a very dark, dark shade of green and blue. I was slammed into this color wall and was able to move. I was no longer in the coffin, and it felt as though I was being weighed down by tons and tons of sand. It took every ounce of willpower in me to navigate through this heavy, resistant sand. I started to feel closer to the surface. I wiggled my way up as hard as I could back into the couch and my own body. I was finally back in the real world. Everything looked as if I was seeing every atom and molecule of everything I saw. It was still extremely refreshing to be back. I had never been more happy in my whole existence as a human being, but these feelings were short-lived. As soon as I forced